From the very beginning of his story, he was an ordinary school librarian, but one day he died due to a fire at school, although his story did not end there, because he managed to be reborn in a new world. In this position, he already had more opportunities than a simple high school librarian. He felt he could do whatever he wanted simply because he called himself the most popular professor in college. Although not everyone thought of him that way, especially the students he pestered, they always felt that Lu Xun was the most capable teacher. This new world was similar to the world described in the most popular novels. In this world, what was important was the power that he thought he possessed in full measure. He always thought that he would become like the hero of novels, become a scoundrel, and thus conquer the whole world, and his name was Zhang Huang. But he soon realized how wrong he was, because it was clear that everything would be different. Anyone who knew his name immediately abandoned him because they considered him a scoundrel and a liar, as well as the worst in terms of coolness. Zhang always thought that working in a library was the worst thing that could happen, but he never thought that he would one day become such a loser. He was a teacher, but unfortunately there was not a single student in his class, because no one wanted to come to a loser. This guy is just unbearable, and in the end he became such a loser that the students felt sorry for him, but still did not go to him. And if there are no students, then everyone hates him. Such were the rules, and in the end, Zhang could not stand it, and began to drink a lot, which affected him even worse. He understood that if he didn't find students today, he would literally be thrown out of here, when suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a girl. Someone quietly entered his classroom and asked quietly, "Is this teacher Lu Xun's classroom?" Hearing this, Zhang immediately thought that he had finally gotten lucky, and apparently he had finally met a new student, and this time he was confident that he would succeed. So, having collected his thoughts, he carefully turned around and asked the girl in response if she wanted to become his student. She didn't hesitate, and immediately said yes. According to her, she heard that Lu Xun was the strictest and most famous teacher at Hongting University. In response to these words, Zhang told her that she was actually confused, as he thought that choosing a mentor was like choosing shoes, where only the size mattered, and if it didn't fit, nothing could be done. But he still believed that there are some teachers who may not be so famous, but if they are ideal, then the progress from their teaching will be noticeable. At first she was a little upset to hear this, but then she told him that in fact her brother had told her the same thing, but her problem was that she just didn't know which teacher would be right for her. Zhang continued to talk, and got to the point that a teacher is someone who teaches and explains, and he, as one of Hongting's oldest teachers, could no longer watch students stray from the true path without even knowing it. But today the girl was lucky because Zhang was willing to recommend a teacher to her based on her skills. It took her a while to collect her thoughts, after which she began to show everything she was capable of. Zhang, looking at this, thought that he actually couldn't see anything from such a distance. But it didn't matter that much, because it was time to show off a little to attract the girl even more. And when she finally finished showing everything she was capable of, Zhang put on a smart face and said that, from his observations, she had a well-developed base, and therefore he believed that she had excellent prospects. He also added that she had quite a rare talent, and so it was obvious to him that she had trained a lot before this. And as proof, he said that she has amazing footwork. Every movement is like a tiger's jump, and her support is trained, and you can be completely confident in it. And this is the most important thing, because trained legs are the key to success. But the girl didn't quite agree with him, because if you believe her words, her leg was injured, and the doctor gave her a diagnosis that meant that she had no chance of full rehabilitation, which Zhang clearly didn't expect to hear. He tried to turn the situation around and said that the fact that he couldn't see the obvious only proved once again that she had a clear advantage, despite her leg injury. The girl listened to his praise for a long time, but at some point she wanted to know what advantage he was talking about. In response, Zhang stood up and said that the most important thing is that she has hope, which made the girl very happy, because she didn't even suspect that her legs still had a chance. However, Zhang immediately told her that in the entire university, there were only 3 teachers, including him, who could help her, and the other 2, as far as he knew, had long since stopped accepting students. The girl was very upset when she heard this, but she still had hope that Zhang was recruiting disciples, but he told her that he was not interested in fame and fortune. She immediately fell to her knees and began to say that she knew perfectly well that he had strong moral principles, but she still asked him to take her as a student. She was immediately ready to promise him that she would not shirk and would never disgrace his honor. Zhang was so happy to hear this that he decided not to waste time and immediately went down to her and offered to sign a contract, which was quite unexpected for the girl, because it seemed to her that she would beg him for a long time. But everything happened much faster, and Zhang had already taken blood from her finger to make a contract. Although she still had several questions spinning around in her head, she was confused by the fact that the man didn't think for a second, and it seemed to her that he had prepared the contract knife in advance anyway. It was time to introduce herself, and according to the girl, her name was Wang Yin. As soon as Zhang heard her name, he immediately took her out of the house and told her to come back tomorrow, and under no circumstances asked her to forget that she had a lesson tomorrow. Zhang was so happy that he had finally found a student, and now he didn't have to worry about being expelled, and at this stage, he felt like this was also a kind of success. Now he thought he could relax because now that he had one worry left, he could finally take care of his student. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted when his head began to spin violently, after which he seemed to fall into the ground and began to fall into an endless abyss. After some time, he woke up and realized that he had lost consciousness. But now he was more interested in what was happening. When he came to his senses, he realized that he was right in front of the entrance to the library of the Heavenly Path. The first thought that came to Zhang's mind was that he had died again, although it seemed to him that this was simply impossible. On the other hand, he suspected that perhaps this was some kind of punishment for him, since he had spent his entire life in the library, and now he was back there again. In any case, he decided that he needed to go there, because it seemed to him that things couldn't get any worse. His first impression of this library was quite good. He immediately noted to himself that this library was much more luxurious than the one in which he had worked for a long time. Besides, there were a lot of books here, and his old library was usually donated by old people, so it was not so rich. But he still didn't understand why he needed this stack of books at all, and how they would help him win the battle. Although Zhang always believed that until you check, you will never know for sure, so he decided to open several books. He suggested that these might actually be first-class wrestling textbooks. But when he reached out to pick up one of these books, his hand literally went through the wall, and he realized that everything around him was immaterial. Zhang was angry because he was being bullied again, and all these books were fake. You can't even pick them up and read them. After some time, having regained consciousness, Zhang was able to leave this place, but his head was still swarming with thoughts about what kind of place this could be. The only thing he was finally convinced of was that the library was a completely inappropriate place and a waste of time. In any case, he decided that it was useless to think now, and decided to first have a snack, and then return to searching for new students. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by someone's shout, clearly calling for Zhang. One of the teachers at the academy called Zhang and reminded him that today students choose their own teachers, and that quite a few new guys had joined him, which apparently could not be said about Zhang. This man humiliated Zhang in front of everyone, so he had to respond and say that there was really no need to brag to him, and besides, it was none of his business. But this man did not stop mocking, and at some point even started shouting that this was teacher Zhang, the only one of all the university teachers who received 0 points in the teacher rating. It was very awkward because the students started to look at this person with disdain. 0 points in the rating, it is really very little. Zhang had no intention of standing and talking to them, or even responding to them, so after they finished talking, he made it clear to them that it was time for him to leave. But apparently the second teacher didn't want to let him go just like that, and so he decided to remind Zhang that he was not a respected teacher. Zhang responded to this by saying that he didn't really care because he was famous, and even the red-haired teacher's newbies knew him. But if you take Chao Xiong, he wasn't famous as a teacher, and even with all that, he still had the audacity to brag. At some point, their dialogue was interrupted by a female voice, which said that teacher Zhang was not really what everyone said. It was Wang Yin who also added that the teacher was very good because he not only accepted her as a student, but also gave her hope for recovery, so she believed that he could easily become number 1. But she was interrupted by the man standing next to her. He reminded her that the master told her to go to Lucen, but she didn't listen and went to that idiot. So he asked the girl to think better and refuse his patronage before the young master found out. Chao Xiong did not miss the opportunity to point out once again that Zhang was incapable of anything, because even his student, who had just come to him, already wanted to leave him. This clearly did not please him, because he remembered how difficult it was for him to recruit her so as not to be expelled from the university. This man, who was sitting next to Wang Yin, came over with a girl and told Zhang that she wanted to leave his class. Zhang did not hesitate to remind the girl that there were too many students who wanted to become his disciples, and so he asked her to think again before making a final decision. And while Wang Yin was thinking, Zhang also turned to the girl's brother to tell him that students who left their teachers had quite a bad reputation, and besides, no teacher would want to take her, so he also asked him to think again whether it was worth leaving Zhang's class. But before the man could answer, Zhang literally pressed him down and began to say that there was nothing to worry about, because he noticed that Wang Yin was very capable, and therefore if he was allowed to train her, then she would achieve a lot together with him, although in his thoughts he was only thinking about how not to let the girl go, because then he would be kicked out. At this point, Cao Xiong decided to intervene and say that if Wang Yin could get out from under Zhang's protection, he would gladly take the girl to himself. Zhang immediately turned around and told him that it was impossible to poach students in broad daylight, and therefore he would be forced to report to the administration, in response to which Cao Xiong suggested that they simply fight and thus arrange an open day. The university charter clearly stipulated such an option. This was an unexpected offer, because Zhang knew that although Cao Xiong had a bad character, he was a much better fighter and teacher, and he would definitely lose here. But on the other hand, if he refused, Wang Yin would definitely abandon him. So he decided that he had to at least try to do this. Otherwise, he would definitely not gather disciples. So he agreed to this proposal. A few minutes later, on the training ground, Cao Xiong introduced the students to the rules of the university. They showed each other students, and then talked about their mistakes and shortcomings, and the one who showed the student the most effective way to progress becomes the winner. The first one will be the young lady Wang Yin, who will first have to demonstrate a series of strikes to them. Wang Yin dealt quite a strong blow, and during this time tried to show her best side. After this blow, Cao Xiong noticed that the girl had a well-developed upper body, but he still felt that her legs were clearly not working, and from what he saw, she clearly had a leg injury. Although Zhang didn't show it, he was shocked that Cao Xiong noticed it right away. By doing this, he once again proved that he was much better than Zhang. After the first series of blows, Cao Xiong walked up to the girl and whispered in her ear that he would tell her what could be done with the leg. While he was telling all this to Wang Yin, Zhang tried to understand what they were talking about. He clearly didn't hear what they were talking about. Cao Xiong advised Wang Yin to imagine that her foot was rooted into the ground, and now she would try to do as Cao Xiong advised her. And as soon as she did this, she immediately noticed that the support in the form of a root clearly helps her accumulate more strength in her hands. Thus, following Cao Xiong's advice, she was able to release almost all of her energy and deliver a strike that was a full 10 units stronger locally. This clearly surprised the other guys, who didn't expect that in 1 minute her striking power would increase by 10 units, but Cao Xiong's disciples weren't surprised by this, because they already knew very well that teacher Cao Xiong was very perceptive and attentive. At this point, Master Cao's instructions were finished, and Master Zhang now entered the battle to give advice to disciple Cao. Zhang immediately stopped Cao's disciple, not allowing him to show what he was capable of. The whole point was that he felt that all this was unfair. He meant that if he lost, he would have to hand over Wang Yin to Cao Xiong, but they hadn't discussed what would happen if he won, so he felt like he was at a disadvantage. Cao Xiong was not at a loss and declared that if Zhang defeated him, Yang would become his disciple. Cao was not at all worried about losing such a disciple because he was sure that Zhang would not be able to defeat him. Apparently, that's how it will be, because as soon as Zhang saw Yang's technique, he knew it was all over, because he didn't even recognize his fighting style, and therefore didn't understand how, in his situation, he could even correct the guy's shortcomings. At that moment, Jan thought that he needed to give it his all, because the last thing he wanted was to be a student of the teacher at the bottom of the list. However, Zhang wasn't going to give up so easily, so he tried to find fault with this guy. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted as if he had been hit on the head with a hammer. Zhang was transported back to that huge library. He honestly didn't understand why he was here again, until the inscription "Heavenly Path of Deficiency" appeared in front of him, although this phrase was a mystery to him. A few seconds later, he noticed a book fly off one of the shelves and towards him. He managed to catch her, and it was a big surprise to him that she turned out to be material and he could support her in his arms, because last time this clearly did not happen. The title of this book was quite unusual. It was called Yan Li, just like the name of the guy Zhang was currently looking at and trying to find fault with. From the very beginning, the book said that Yang Li was the youngest of the Yuncheng Li family, and it also said that his fighting style was White Lotus, but most importantly, it pointed out his shortcomings, among which were too many unnecessary strikes. This was only the first drawback, so Zhang did not stop and continued to read this book carefully, and at some point, he reached the 12th drawback, which was that his left hand was much more developed, but Yang used his right more often, so the strikes lost their potential. After reading all this information, he finally returned to the training ground, where Yan was able to land 62 punches on the first try. At this time, Zhang finally realized that the library of the Heavenly Path was created specifically to identify and record all the shortcomings. Considering the information he can get, it's a pretty good gift for him to start his new life with. And now Zhang is absolutely ready to finally show everyone around him his true strength. He started by saying that Yang had 12 faults, which made Chao Xiong laugh. The rest of the guys also started laughing, because each of them understood that Yang was using the White Lotus style, which was known to everyone for its power, meaning that it was incredibly difficult to see any flaws in such a fighter, especially in such quantities. He was angry that they didn't want to believe his words, so he said he didn't want to continue competing. After that, he turned to Wang Yin and told her that they were leaving because such bets were simply unacceptable. He was immediately stopped by Chao Xiong, who assured the man that they all trusted Mr. Zhang, so they all wanted to hear his advice. Zhang knew that Chao was only doing this to laugh again, but this time it would be different, and Zhang knew it, so the smile never left his face. The first thing he asked Jan to do was to punch with his left hand instead of his right. This clearly surprised the guy, and the other students started laughing even more because he simply asked the guy to change his hand. Was that really his wise advice? Chao Xiong simply asked Yang to do what Zhang asked, and at that moment he thought that he knew Yang's ability very well, and was therefore confident that his left punch would not reach even 30 units. Jan struck with his left hand, and without expecting it, delivered a blow that was almost twice as strong as the previous one. Cao opened his mouth and froze like a statue in surprise at what he saw. As a result, Yan got the number 123, and this greatly surprised all the children and teachers, including because even teacher Lu Sen had not achieved such a result. Yan himself could not believe that he was capable of delivering such a powerful blow. Zhang was very glad that his advice had worked after all, and now he was once again convinced that the library of the Heavenly Path was given to him for a reason. After thinking these thoughts, he turned to Teacher Cao to inform him that his result was only 20%, but Zhang's advice helped Yang double his strength. This made him say through his pain that Yan Li was now Zhang's disciple, no matter how sad it was for him to say it. At this point, he decided to end his speech and ordered the rest of the students to leave. He thought he was lucky just this once, but he assured himself that he would find a way to get revenge on Zhang. Zhang, meanwhile, threw his stone to Yan so that he would hurry up and check his identity on his stone. At that moment, Yang thought that things couldn't possibly get any worse, and that the other teachers probably wouldn't accept him if he ran away. So despite his disappointment, he bit his finger and signed the contract with Zhang. A few hours later, rumors spread throughout the academy that teacher Cao Xiong had recently competed with teacher Zhang, who was at the bottom of the rankings. At first, it was a source of laughter, but then the laughter turned to surprise when they heard that Zhang had won because he had been able to give advice to Yang, who had doubled his attack. Hearing something like this, the girl became interested and immediately wanted to know how someone could do something that even teacher Lu Sen couldn't do. Her friend believed that it was not just luck, because it increased the impact by 100%. In any case, the girl didn't believe it, and her main reason for coming to this university was because she wanted to get to teacher Lu Sen, and so she didn't understand how they even dared to say that some loser from the bottom of the list was superior to Lu Sen. So she decided to go and teach him a lesson, and Zhang thought that when he saw someone's skills, the library in his head would automatically generate a book with flaws, and now that he had such strength, He was confident that he could become stronger. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a girl who entered his classroom without permission and rather brazenly asked if he was Mr. Zhang Huang. When she came in, he was slightly dozing, so her words woke him up, and he wanted to know what was going on and why she was here. The girl immediately started talking about how she came here because she found out that he was able to increase Ian's punching power by 100%. But she didn't believe it, and wanted him to prove it and give her some advice so that she could also double her strength. Zhang, without thinking twice, refused her, which angered the girl because she thought that he was not busy with anything at the moment. He told her that he was currently recruiting students and not just helping little rude girls. These words clearly angered her, and she wanted to know what he wanted from her then. Zhang thought it was obvious and said directly that he had one condition for her to become his disciple. She thought that in this way he was deceiving the students again, and it seemed so low to her that she thought that she would first become his student, and after she revealed herself, she would break the contract with him and transfer to Lu Sen's group. So she agreed with this idea, but immediately told him that if she found out that he was deceiving the students, she would tell everyone about it. Her friends followed their dialogue closely and could not believe that the girl really wanted to become his student, and it seemed to them that it was very terrible. So they immediately got together and ran to tell her family about it. Zhang suddenly said that he had changed his mind, and now did not want to take her as a student because she was terribly impatient, and he preferred attentive students. Inside, this made the girl even more angry, and she wanted to expose him more than anything, so she put on a sweet face and asked him not to be angry because she said she sincerely wanted to become his disciple, so she asked him to accept her again. He told her that if she wanted to become his student, she would have to clean the place so that not a speck of dust remained, and also asked her not to forget about the toilet outside, thereby assuring her that he would test her patience, and if he was satisfied, then she would study with him. The girl's whole appearance showed that this was clearly too much, but Zhang didn't give in to her, and said that if it was so difficult for her, then she could always turn around and leave, but in his mind, he thought that she clearly couldn't play such games with him. And apparently he was right, because at that very second the girl suddenly changed her mind and took the broom, while assuring Zhang that she would do everything. She started cleaning with the thought that she had never had to back down before, and this time she was ready to do it. She would just wait for the moment and take revenge on him for everything. After some time, she was finally able to clean up as Zhang told her. But that was not all. He also wanted her to confirm her identity, so that he could be sure that she was indeed his student. She happily took his stone, and said that she was actually already looking forward to all his instructions, although she was mentally thinking about how to restrain herself from tearing his head off. After she did everything Zhang asked, he finally told her that he needed to look at her strike first to see what level she was at. The girl was clearly surprised that it took him only one blow, because she didn't understand what could be seen in one blow. While the girl was delivering that very blow, Zhang was already in the library of the Heavenly Path to read a book about that girl. He found it quite quickly, and within a few seconds it was already in his hands. The girl was the daughter of the Lord of Baiyun City. She had the highest level of mastery of the basics. Her fighting style was white jade kung fu, and yet she had as many as 27 shortcomings. Given such a number of mistakes, Zhang immediately thought that there was nothing special about the girl, until he saw that with so many mistakes, she was dialing the number 123. Zhang was the first to praise her, and so he said that her strength was worthy of a lord's daughter. The girl was happy to hear this, but she was still eager to hear his analysis and see what mistakes he might have noticed. Meanwhile, she held the crystal in her hand that she had been recording their conversation with, and thought that if he screwed up, she would show it to everyone and watch him make excuses. But the girl had to change her mind when Zhang told her that she was sick, although she immediately began to deny it and became embarrassed. He in turn assured her that he was not scolding her, but simply saying that she was physically ill. The girl continued to deny this and responded by telling him that he didn't know what he was talking about. But he paid no attention to her words and continued to talk about how often she felt pain, especially during the full moon, when the body and mind are especially irritated. And one more thing, he also knew that no matter whether she trained or not, she was still always irritable. All this made an impression on the girl, because he literally told her everything she felt, but she did not tell anyone about it. Zhang smiled and said that there was really no point in being surprised, since he was quite an experienced teacher. She lowered her head and asked him sheepishly, "Is there a solution to her problem?" Zhang immediately told her that the solution was actually simple. All she had to do was come to his class tomorrow, where he would definitely explain everything to her. He also did not forget to say that he wanted to see complete trust. If she did not justify it, then it would be better for her to go to another teacher. In response, she assured him that she now trusted him completely, and after hearing these words, Zhang wanted to know if she still wanted to keep that crystal with the recording. The girl immediately squeezed and broke it in her hands and said that this would not happen again. Thoughts flashed through the girl's head about how he immediately recognized her illness and realized that she was recording him on the crystal. Now she couldn't understand only one thing. How could such an experienced man end up at the very bottom of the rankings? The only explanation she had was that he was too noble and didn't need wealth and recognition. Suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by a man who stopped them both. It was Yao Han, the governor of Baiyun City. It was the girl's uncle, from whom she immediately wanted to know what he was doing here. Instead of answering her question, he asked her not to say that she had become Zhang Huang's disciple, but to his great regret, the girl immediately confirmed it. He then turned to Zhang and said that her niece was the pride of the family, and therefore she couldn't study with someone like Zhang, so he asked him to let her go, then added that he would either listen to him or go to the principal and seek his expulsion from the academy. But before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by the girl herself, who began to ask him not to do this because she had voluntarily become his student. He was clearly surprised that she didn't understand that he was not a worthy teacher who would definitely not be able to increase her strength. She felt very awkward, but still, despite all these feelings, she tried to tell her uncle that she had already made her final decision. As he listened to her, he noticed a broken sound recording crystal on the floor, and this immediately made him furious, and he immediately pounced on Zhang with words to find out what he was going to do with his niece, after which he once again ordered him to immediately release her from the class. Otherwise, he threatened Zhang to destroy him, but he calmly told Yao that he was wrong when he thought that he brainwashed the girl. She also tried to calm her uncle down at that moment, saying that if he didn't calm down right now, she would never speak to him again. He didn't understand why she was suddenly so protective of him, but she felt awkward talking about it here, so she took his hand and said that they were leaving immediately. However, the girl's uncle still did not trust him and believed that Zhang was clearly up to something. Zhang himself did not understand what he was being accused of, since he had simply accepted the student into his group. Two guys were walking around the academy grounds, and one was calming the other down because one of them was not accepted by any teacher. One of them said that they had been together since childhood and even started training together, and that teacher Wang was the best martial artist in Hongting, so he believed that his friend would definitely surpass him, and this clearly made him sad. His friend tried to cheer him up in every way, and as soon as he saw the sign for first class, he immediately suggested that his friend go there, since perhaps he would be accepted there. The boy didn't want to go there because the class clearly looked very old, but his friend assured him that he should be optimistic. If the class is old, it means the teacher is experienced. Zhang was a little surprised when two guys came to him and one of them wanted to become his disciple. But what surprised him even more was that his friend was so eager to prove to Zhang that the boy was a good spearman and would therefore become a good student. Zhang was not against taking another student onto his team, but first asked him to demonstrate his skills. The boy was clearly not prepared for this, but his friend assured him that everything would be fine because the teacher just wanted to give him a couple of tips. At that moment, the boy couldn't get the thought out of his head that everything around him was unkempt, and so he thought that the teacher was exactly the same and was unlikely to teach him anything. But he still decided that even if he really was that terrible, he simply wouldn't become his disciple. And to test his theory, he decided to show everything he could do and see the teacher's reaction. He was able to knock out 123 units of power on the testing stone, after which he bowed to the teacher and asked him for advice. But as soon as he looked up, he noticed that this teacher didn't even look at him. So the guy decided that, apparently, his guesses were exactly as he thought. But suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by Zhang, who couldn't help but notice that someone had emotionally hurt the guy. Moreover, he noticed that the guy felt humiliated. The guy clearly didn't expect to hear this, so much so that he even casually mentioned that he secretly loved one girl, but nothing worked out between them. Although he immediately came to his senses and said that it didn't matter anyway. His friend immediately ran up to him and began to find out who had offended him and why he hadn't told him about it, but he didn't want to discuss it now, so he asked the teacher not to talk about it, since it was his personal business and had nothing to do with his preparation. But Zhang clearly didn't think so, and then added that his punch was fierce and purposeful, and that it spoke volumes about his personality. Zhang immediately noted that he only thought about the present, not the future. The most important thing, though, is that this injury made him indecisive and he became very afraid of failure, and because of this his punch became much weaker. The guys were very surprised that Zhang was able to see that he was in love and what kind of character the guy had in general. But Zhang immediately told them that in fact there was nothing surprising about it, because a fighter's blow directly depends on his emotional state, and if it is unstable, then the blow will be exactly the same, and in his case it was clear at first glance that love was to blame. The boys stood there with their mouths open in surprise, as they saw how quickly Zhang had found his true problem. Even Weapon Master Wang hadn't noticed it. Zhang broke their shock to give the guy some advice, telling him that in order to earn respect in a relationship, he had to be strong, and asking him to think about how he looked to others if he didn't respect himself. Now he asked him to understand himself, let go of his grievances and learn from his mistakes, so he should become much stronger. And now, hearing this, Zhang asked the guy to hit him again and see what he was really capable of. The only thoughts in his head were that he shouldn't insult himself, and all he needed was to believe in himself. It was with these thoughts that he struck the stone being evaluated. And what was his friend's surprise when the force of the guy's blow increased almost twofold and amounted to as much as 200 units. After that, the guy realized that his teacher must be Zhang, so without thinking twice, he knelt down in front of him and began to ask him about it, and Zhang himself was not against helping the young guy, so the first thing he asked him to do was to verify his identity on the stone. This guy's friend was a little jealous because the thought immediately occurred to him that if he knew this teacher was so cool, he would have gone to him too. But another question confused him. If there had always been such a great teacher in Hongting, then why had he never heard of him? So he decided to ask the teacher his name, and when he introduced himself, the boys realized that it was the name of the worst teacher in the academy. Zhang confirmed the boys' guesses on this matter with a smile and said that he really was that terrible teacher. They hoped until the end that the man would deny this information, but not only did he not do so, but he also confirmed this information with a smile. His new student clearly didn't understand why the teacher was so self-critical. In response to this question, he said that in fact, this world was full of price tags, and there was nothing wrong with that. Although in his mind he thought that if it weren't for the Library of the Heavenly Path, he would most likely remain a failure, since without it he didn't have any special talents. Zhang's student, upon hearing this, immediately wanted to give Zhang credit, but Zhang stopped the guy and said that in fact it didn't matter. Like his bad reputation, what was important was to study hard and go towards his goal. The boy happily said goodbye to the teacher, and his friend could not help but notice that in the end, everything turned out well for the boy, and now he too has a wonderful teacher. Zhang also smiled happily because he realized that today was also a holiday for him, since he had 4 new students. Moreover, for the first time in his career, his license plate has expired, which he will have to get from the logistics building if he wants to continue recruiting new students. As soon as the man entered the building, he immediately noticed that it was completely deserted, but his opinion changed dramatically when he heard voices informing him that their first teacher, Zhang Huang, had appeared before them. The voice belonged to Can Biao, who was the head of the logistics department, and as soon as Zhang noticed him, the big guy decided to find out what he was doing there, because everyone knew he was having trouble recruiting people. Zhang immediately remembered how Can Biao always bullied him because he didn't earn much due to his reputation. And taking all this into account, Zhang immediately thought that maybe it was because of this big guy that he only had 4 tokens to begin with. Anyway, the first thing he did was tell the big guy that he was out of registration tags and would like some more. These words made the big guy laugh incredibly loudly, because he didn't understand how a teacher like Zhang could run out of tokens. Zhang actually expected this kind of reaction. so he offered a bet if he didn't believe him. Qianbao had always been interested in betting, so he immediately agreed. But before that, he wanted to know what exactly he could bet. Zhang was prepared for this question, and therefore immediately answered that he wanted to bet his face, which meant that the loser would receive 3 slaps in public from the winner. Qin was pleasantly surprised by Zhang's creativity, so he agreed to the idea without any problem. But he still decided to add that if Zhang lost, he would receive 3 slaps from each of them, not just from Qian. His 3 assistants went to get a book containing information about the relationships of students with teachers, and with the help of this book, they were going to find out if he was lying. But after a few minutes, their faces changed because they suddenly discovered information that actually confirmed that the 4 students recognized him as the teacher. Qianbao clearly couldn't believe it, so he ordered the book to be brought to him immediately so that he could personally verify its authenticity. Reading this, he convinced himself and the other teachers that if this was true, then the guys who went to Zhang were complete fools. But when he started reading the detailed description of each of the disciples, a smile appeared on his face because he noticed that Wang Yin had a leg injury, and it seemed to him that all the others would have the same thing. This satisfied face did not last long, because then he saw that among his disciples was the daughter of the Wang family, which was one of the richest in Qianshuan. But that was not all, because what happened next was even more fun. Zhao Ya, who was 7th in the entrance exam and was the daughter of the ruler of Baiyun City, and right behind her were Yang Li and Zheng Yang, who were among the top 100 fighters. After learning all this, Qianbao came to the conclusion that Zhang had simply brainwashed these children. Otherwise, they would not even look at a loser like him. Zhang had no intention of proving anything to them, and immediately said that it was really up to them whether to believe him or not, but it would still remain the truth, and considering all this, he said that it was time for them to fulfill their promise. But apparently they didn't intend to do this from the very beginning, because they started telling him that they wouldn't do this, and he clearly wouldn't do anything to them for it, and if he tried, they immediately said that they would simply beat him up, and he would regret that he ever came here. Zhang received all these words with joy. Deep down, he even wanted them to refuse to carry out the punishments. One of them even stepped out of the crowd and said that Zhang was not worthy of even touching his face, let alone slapping him. But he was eager to teach Zhang the lesson he clearly deserved. At this moment, Qian thought that Zhang was only 3rd ranked, and he would definitely not be able to stand up to a 4th-ranked master. It was simply beyond his capabilities. In total, as is known, there are 9 combat ranks. The higher the rank, the more difficult the transition to the next. Also, each rank is divided into initial, intermediate, advanced, and peak levels. Therefore, given this information, it was clear that even if Zhang was well versed in other people's skills, he was only at the level of a 3rd-rank master, and with such skills, it would be truly difficult to win. While Qianbao was thinking about all this, blood appeared in front of him, which made him very angry, because he immediately asked them to deal with it cleanly and without unnecessary aggression. But he didn't even expect to hear that it wasn't Zhang's blood, and when he started to turn around, he noticed that they seemed to be in trouble. Zhang managed to knock out one of the teachers with one punch, and now he stood up and slowly called the other boys to him. Qian was beside himself with anger because he honestly didn't understand how this was even possible. After all, Li Yuan was definitely a rank higher. How could such a thing even happen? Zhang continued to anger them by calling them over with a smile. They thought that he was just lucky, and now he would definitely get what he deserved from them for his insolence. Zhang closed his eyes and moved to the library of the Heavenly Path, where 3 books on the shortcomings of these teachers had already been prepared. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to familiarize himself with them and strike where they could have the greatest effect. Each of them had their own point they didn't want to reach, and Zhang knew it very well. This information helped him defeat all these impudent people. After just one touch to each of them, Zhang became the winner, and they froze and could only tremble in fear. The thing is that Zhang touched their vital points, because he knew very well that all fighters who train hard have such a point, and if it is touched even by a child, it can lead to very bad consequences. Therefore, vital points are the most important place of a fighter. Often even close people do not know about them. Qianbao could barely speak, but he still wanted to ask the guy how he knew about their vital points. Of course, he knew in his mind that all this was thanks to the library, because he only now realized that it could help not only in teaching students, but also in real combat, despite the fact that he was from the ground and did not really understand kung fu. But he told Tianboa that they just needed to fulfill the promise, and everything would be fine. All this irritated Tianbao, so he immediately called Zhang a pathetic and incompetent teacher who dared to attack his superiors in a public place, so he would definitely go to the administration to file a complaint against him. The other teachers agreed with him too. They even told him that he would do better to kneel if he didn't want to get fired. For Zhang, this was so humiliating, because he understood perfectly well that they simply could not win with the power of intelligence, so they decided to use meanness. Then he decided that he too needed to resort to their methods, since that was what they wanted so much. After that, he began to talk about how Master Qian Biao stole Elder Chen Ming's treasures half a year ago. And he did it only to please a woman who ultimately did not stay with him. Next in line was teacher Bai Lin, who had driven the girl to suicide 3 years ago by abusing her, and her spirit often returned to him in his dreams. Teacher Chun deceitfully took away his brother's business by poisoning him and successfully blamed it all on an accident. When all those teachers heard this, they forgot what had hurt them so much because they could not believe that Zhang knew their secrets. But without thinking twice, they decided to ask him for forgiveness and immediately admitted that they were the only ones who were wrong. Zhang could only reply that he really didn't have time to deal with their past mistakes, but he wanted to convey to them that if they repeated them in the future, he would definitely ruin their careers once and for all. They assured him that they would not dare to do so again, and as a token of gratitude for his kindness, Tian Bao gave him his registration tokens and said that he could indeed take as many as he wanted. Zhang took exactly as many tokens as he thought he needed and left, and his new friends wished him a good day. The man's head was filled with thoughts about how long he had been waiting for this exciting life, and that this was exactly what he needed. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted when he saw 2 guys pulling a third one, who seemed to be screaming that he didn't want to live anymore. As it turned out, the big guy was shouting that he wanted to die, but at the same time he was holding another student's hand and not letting him leave. And the third one was trying to explain to him that if he wanted to die so much, then he didn't need to drag anyone along with him. But he asked them to leave him alone because he was already dead. Although the guys tried to shout to him that it was he who was holding them, and not they him, Zhang didn't quite understand what was going on here and how it had led to this. In any case, he decided that it was better for him not to interfere in this situation, since at the moment his main task was to continue recruiting students. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a shout that seemed to be directed directly at him, because he heard someone shouting something about the uniform of one of the teachers. And a few seconds later he noticed the same big guy clinging to his leg. He immediately turned around and saw the 2 students quickly running away, thanking Zhang along the way for helping them distract the big guy. Zhang tried to calmly ask this guy to let him go, but he refused, and kept saying that he had already been rejected for patronage 10 times, and today was his last day of selection, so he just wanted to ask him to take pity on him and take him as a disciple. The man came down closer to him and said that if the boy wanted to become his student so much, then first he needed to show him everything he was capable of, and that hanging on his leg was useless. The big guy immediately agreed with Zhang and stood up, and a few seconds later, bricks magically appeared in his hands, with which he hit himself on the head and, apparently, thus demonstrated his abilities. However, Zhang still decided to ask him what this big guy was doing and why was he beating himself. Suddenly, the library decided to answer his question, which at one point activated and, as it turned out, it was an unusual form of kung fu, which was called Henglian, and, as it turned out, Yuan Dao, a random martial artist in the early stages of his second wind. The guy had 18 flaws, the first of which was the inactivated horned dragon blood. The second was a weak character and unstable training. In any case, surprisingly, he had quite a rich bloodline. But still, even in this case, he was not a capable guy. Suddenly, Zhang realized what he had just read. Could this guy have something to do with the power of the imperial blood? In this world, the birth data of the body and blood are of great importance, and if a fighter has a heritage, he can improve much more actively than his opponents. Thus, there are several types of bodies: the purest body, the yin body, the yang body, the golden body. Likewise, it can be said that there are several types of blood: ancient blood, new blood, ancestral blood, and variable blood. The blood of the horned dragon is one of the ancient bloods. It is said that when it is used to its full potential, the fighter becomes invulnerable to weapons, and nothing can break him. It could be said that this was one of the best bloodlines in terms of defense, and Zhang could not even imagine that such a big guy would have such a huge potential, although it would be incredibly difficult to unlock. Either way, he knew that this guy definitely needed to be taken into his class. So he immediately gave him his token to make a deal with him, and the big guy was over the moon. He was so happy that he finally had a teacher, but Zhang immediately asked him to stop rejoicing because they had a lot of work ahead of them. Suddenly, their dialogue was interrupted by Shang Bin. He was the grandson of the elder of the Shang Academy, and one of Shenbi's admirers. This guy, as soon as he saw Zhang, immediately told him that the teacher was not very good and was recruiting exactly the same kind of students. The girl standing next to him was called Shenbi Ju. She was one of the top teachers in the academy with a huge number of fans. Moreover, it could be said that Zhang was once a big fan of hers. And now Zhang didn't understand who Shang Bin was talking about and who he called trash. Shang Bin smiled and told Zhang with great confidence that he was talking about him if he didn't understand. Zhang put his hand to his nose and began to say that if Shang Bin was talking about him, then he simply did not understand why it stank so much, and he did not forget to notice that this smell only appeared after Shang Bin appeared. He immediately became enraged by such an insult, and began to shout that he had no right to speak like that at all. But then he noticed that even Shen Bi was laughing at him, so he immediately decided that he needed to be more cool-headed because he definitely couldn't embarrass himself in front of her. So he decided to remind Zhang of his place in the ranking, which absolutely everyone knows, and he also knew the big guy who was standing next to him, and according to Shan's words, this guy's punching power was only 15, and he was only good at defense. He also did not forget to add that the guy was the last in the entrance exams. And finally, he said that it was quite a lucky coincidence that the teacher and the student from the bottom of the list had finally met. As soon as the big man heard Zhang Huang's name, and that he was ranked last, he realized that it was probably in vain that he asked him to be his teacher. Zhang didn't intend to react harshly to all these words, and decided to tell Shan that if he finished speaking, then his personality could leave. Zhang personally let him go. Although this made him angry, he still decided to listen to Zhang. But first he turned to Shenbi and told her that they had better leave here, because communicating with this abomination was dangerous. It could negatively affect her beauty. Before leaving, Shenbi decided to say some nice words to Zhang. So she said that last time, although he was at the bottom of the list, she asked him not to give up and work hard, and then he would definitely succeed. Zhang understood that she thought that since he took this big guy, it meant that he had given up on himself. But he still told her that he was pleased to hear such words from her. But he could still guarantee that this big guy was a diamond in the rough, and if he was trained properly, he would most likely shine. Shenbi didn't argue with him, and said that she would look forward to it, then turned to Shang to tell him that she was already very tired, so she would like to rest for a while without him. Shang again decided that Zhang was the only one to blame for this, so he promised him that the time would come when he would have to answer for everything he had done. While they were talking there, the big guy decided to run away very carefully, but Zhang noticed this and pretended that the big guy was just confused and went the wrong way, because in fact his class was in a completely different direction. The boy was trying to say that he was too weak, and therefore didn't want to ruin teacher Zhang's reputation, and therefore he wouldn't mind if the man suddenly decided to let him go. Zhang came close to him and said that these were meaningless words because he had already dripped blood onto the token, and therefore from this second on, he would live as his disciple, and then die as his disciple. After this conversation, Zhang went to his room to think about the fact that today was his last day of recruiting disciples, and it looked like his limit would stop at 5. But in reality, everything was fine, so he decided that he needed to sort out all the materials first so that he would be ready for his first lesson tomorrow. He believed that he had previously trained according to the principle of the 9 paths of Hongting, and each level corresponded to the essence of the 9 ranks. Many in Hongting train according to this system. And it looks like he's the last one of all the teachers left at rank 3. Everyone has already reached at least rank 4, so he needs to pull himself together and catch up with them as quickly as possible. But his training methods weren't quite up to the task, so he decided to visit one place where he thought he might find a more successful training method than he had the last few times. The essence of unifying true ki is to collect the spiritual energy that is around them, and this process is very slow and difficult because the spiritual energy needs to be reconstructed to reunite with the true ki of the body, and some masters study day and night for at least 3 years to achieve an acceptable result. And all this clearly did not suit Zhang. He most of all did not want to do this for years. Besides, his classes were tomorrow, and if the students found out that their teacher was not even capable of high-quality qi collection, then they would definitely drop out of school. He knew that he could search for multiple paths in the Heavenly Path library, but the catch was that there were over 1,000 of these flaws, and he literally couldn't eliminate them all in such a short period of time. So he thought that perhaps he could gather enough information about other teaching methods to use the strengths of one system to compensate for the weaknesses of another. And for this he came to Elder Shin Mo, who was quite surprised to see the guy here because it was already late, and at such a time no one visits the library. Zhang explained to him that the thing was that he was going to cross the 3rd rank, but he had some questions, which was why he came here. The elder took this information with a smile and told him that there was actually nothing wrong with him cultivating slowly, as the university always needed fresh blood like him. So he told him that the information about the 3rd rank was in the 4th line, for which Zhang was very grateful. The elder had always known that Zhang was actually a good boy, he just always lacked ability, and so he sincerely hoped that his results would not be so dismal. As soon as Zhang entered this library, the first thing he noticed was that there were quite a large number of books in it. It even seemed to him that the university library was no poorer than an ordinary modern library, and besides, he almost immediately found a row with the books he needed. He picked up the first book that suited him, and was a little surprised that this book described a method that had more than 3,000 shortcomings, and he was a little confused as to why this system was so popular. It seemed simply impossible to him to correct so many mistakes, but at one point, he realized that now was not the best time to despair. And thanks to this, an idea came to him, the essence of which was that he did not have to correct all the shortcomings. He decided that he could simply fix the thing that was bothering him on his stage, and he was absolutely right, because it turned out that there were only 10 flaws on his stage. The only thing he regretted was that the library of the Heavenly Path only talked about errors and not about the methods of correction. But he did not despair because he understood that he could find the advantages of different methods that would cover the shortcomings of others, and by combining all the information, something new and more advanced could be obtained. This thought gave him the understanding that since he had come here, he had a great chance to gather information about the 4th and 5th ranks. He sat for quite a long time over the books until he had become familiar with everything he wanted. After quite a long time, Zhang walked out of the library with the thought that the information about the 4th and 5th ranks had been found, and now he knew that it was time to return to practice. The elder was surprised that Zhang was able to finish so quickly, and so decided to offer him a copy of one of the books to take with him, but Zhang assured him that his question was not really deep enough to warrant taking copies. After which, he thanked the elder for his kindness and left. The venerable Mo at that moment thought that it was in vain that he did not take a copy with him, because it seemed to him that Zhang would soon return to him again to reread that very book. That evening, Zhang, sitting in his room, thought about how he had finally managed to collect everything he needed with the help of the library of the Heavenly Path. And now the worst part had come. Now he had to put it all together, and the guy didn't even know how to do it. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted when the library suddenly called him without his consent. He still didn't understand anything, and this continued until books suddenly started falling from the sky. And so it went on until one fine moment, a bright light suddenly appeared before Zhang's eyes, from which he had to hide, because it was simply impossible to look at it. After a while this light finally went out, and in its place appeared a book, which fell right into Zhang's hands. As soon as he opened this book, he realized that in front of him were all his notes from the elder's library, only they were structured and laid out on shelves. He immediately noticed that the contents of this book could not belong to any of the known teachings, since its information was completely new to the whole world. And the weirdest thing is that it still doesn't have a name, so the guy suggested that maybe he should choose this name. Zhang decided that since this was created by the Heavenly Path Library, it would be better to call it the Heavenly Path Technique. And as soon as he said it out loud, the title itself appeared on the book, which even scared the guy a little. After some time, he began to study this book and did it gradually, as the library of the Heavenly Path recommended to him. And at some point, his understanding and knowledge of this book reached its maximum. Zhang immediately realized that this was some kind of breakthrough, but he was surprised by the fact that it happened so quickly, because he knew that other people who had advanced to the rank of skin and bone purification fasted for a long time, constantly meditated, and all this in order to achieve even a small success. It only took him half a night to reach the 5th rank of Qi vessel. He also couldn't help but notice that his training had increased the strength of his Qi, but he always felt that it required sacred or divine purification. But it seemed like the Heavenly Path Library had done all the work for him. He realized that apparently when he used Hongting's 9 paths, he had made too many mistakes, but now he seemed to have finally been able to gather the highest quality Qi. After such a breakthrough, he immediately became curious about whether he could use the Heavenly Breakthrough Library to learn a sacred or even divine purification method. There are 3 types of Qi energy: high, medium, and low, and accordingly, the higher its quality, the stronger the fighter. Zhang was confident that he was now using the highest quality Qi, and that this practice had improved his body and his energy. So taking all these points into account, he decided that he immediately needed to test what he was now capable of. The first thing he decided to do was to go to the measuring plate that his students were hitting. It seemed to him that it made sense to start with this. He gathered more energy in his hand and was about to deliver his first blow after meditating. And as soon as he struck this blow, the number 8 appeared in front of his face, followed by the word ding, which was roughly equivalent to a blow of 8,000 units. Zhang initially thought that this plate was simply defective, since according to the measuring stone, its strength was equal to that of a 6th-rank sage. In a way, he looked at his hands and thought that this was quite frightening to him. Moreover, he managed to reach the 5th rank in just one night, so he decided it was better to keep this news a secret. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a strange sound. Zhang thought that it was too late for guests, so he decided to check who had come to see him. When he saw this person, he immediately realized that whoever he was, this person was clearly heading towards his room. But more importantly, he did not notice Zhang. This unexpected guest at that moment thought that Zhang himself was to blame for what would happen, because he should not have taken everyone as a disciple. Zhang knew that if this man was sneaking up on his teacher in the middle of the night, he certainly wasn't bringing joy, so he decided to take off his teacher's uniform first for better camouflage. And just as he thought about it, the man turned around and shouted in his direction to find out who was hiding around the corner. Zhang knew very well that this man only came here to destroy him, so he decided to say that he had the same plan because he thought that it would clearly confuse him. And as soon as Zhang said that he was here to destroy the failed teacher, the unwanted guest calmed down and said that he would cover for him later. Zhang continued to play the role of a criminal, but before that he was surprised that this unwanted guest did not object, because it seemed to him that he himself would like to destroy him. After that, the man said that he was not actually here to destroy Teacher Zhang, but only to scare him a little. He was going to cut off his tender organ and thus prevent the reproduction of people like him, and all this because he was so unfair to his niece. For the first time in his life, Zhang did not regret going to training instead of going to bed, because if he had fallen asleep, the consequences would have been very dire. In any case, this strange man decided that it was time to end the conversation and get down to business, and Zhang decided to offer him to start first, because if he simply destroyed him, there would be no point in castrating him. The man at this moment thought that it was such an incredible coincidence that they both came that night to finish off Zhang, so while thinking about it, he suggested to his unexpected partner that they go on this mission together. First of all, the criminal asked him to focus on his energy in order to better feel his body and deliver the most powerful blow. Zhang was transported to the library of the Heavenly Path at this moment, because he realized that he had heard this man's voice before, and the book itself fell into his hands. This man's name was Yao Han, and he was a servant of the Baiyun house, a 6th-rank fighter who had opened the 8 chakra points. Zhang immediately understood that Yao was Zhao Yao's direct assistant, but he didn't understand what he had done, that this mercenary had come to destroy him. In any case, he decided to ignore the fact that he was already 6th in rank, and that he had beaten 12 dings on the evaluation stone, because if he didn't teach him a lesson, then he wouldn't be able to be called Zhang Huang. But he still understood that this clearly had to be done not in direct confrontation, because then he would definitely lose. So he decided to outsmart Yao a little and at one point shouted at him to look at the sky because there was a UFO flying there. Yao didn't understand what a UFO was and how it related to their case, but he didn't even think that this was all just a common trick by Zhang, who deceived him in such a childish way. Zhang didn't miss his chance and delivered a fairly strong blow from behind, which sent the man flying into the nearest wall. He thought that the 6th rank should be much stronger, but apparently the fact that he knows all of his opponent's weaknesses decides a lot in this regard. Yao didn't quite understand why the guy suddenly attacked him, because it seemed to him that they both wanted to take revenge on Zhang. But apparently Yao was very wrong when he decided that he had an ally in such a matter. After that, Zhang dealt several dozen blows to his opponent, and realized that in fact, all this was not as difficult as it might have seemed to him. This guy was the assistant of the Yao family, and Zhao's uncle, so he did not hit him very hard. But before he left, Zhang knew he first needed to divert suspicion from himself. The idea immediately came to him to blame everything on Shan, although Zhang believed that it was his own fault, because if he had not approached him that afternoon, he would not have even remembered him. After that, he turned to Yao and said that Zhang had angered him during the day, so he wanted to teach him a lesson. Zhang pretended to talk to himself, but Yao heard everything perfectly well, and so Zhang made him understand that he was Shan. After that, he made a threatening face and ordered Yao to get out of here immediately. This scene made Yao think that he saw this person talking to Zhang today, and he also knows very well that they often quarrel with each other, and in the end he said something for Shenbi, so he was sure that it was that guy. Zhang thanked himself again for deciding to train today instead of just lying around and resting. Besides, tonight had given him the understanding that he needed to become much stronger if he wanted to survive in this world. The next morning, all his students except Zhao gathered, and when he asked the boys why she was not there, they answered him quite confidently that she was simply late and would come a little later. He decided that they would start without her, and then began to talk about how his teaching methods differed from others, saying that individuality was important to him, so he would work on each of their styles. And he decided to start with Wang Yin because she was his first student. Although the girl agreed with him, at this moment she thought about how yesterday, when she returned home, she found out that teacher Zhang was actually a liar. So she mentally didn't want to have anything to do with him, although she couldn't tell him about it yet. At this point, Zhang asked her to come closer to him and show her her strike again, as he needed to examine it more closely. Wang Yin felt that there was too little space for this, but Zhang assured her that it did not matter. The thing is, when he first looked at her strength, he didn't have the Heaven's Path library yet, and so he didn't quite understand what shortcomings the girl had. So she had to give another blow, which was quite strong, and Zhang immediately decided to praise her. Then Wang Yin wanted to say something to her teacher, but he did not let her do it because at some point he simply interrupted her. And he began to say that if he was not mistaken, then she injured her leg 2 years ago in a fight. Wang Yin didn't even understand how he could know all this. Zhang ignored her questions and continued to talk about how there were 3 points on a person's leg that were responsible for strength, speed, and agility, and it seemed to him that her opponent had touched the point that was responsible for strength, which caused it to close and the blood to flow in the opposite direction. At this moment, Wang Yin thought that one of the top doctors they had invited had said the same thing, but he couldn't do anything about it, since it required a master of at least the 8th rank. So she asked him without much hope if he could cure her, but the answer completely changed her expression, because Zhang said with complete confidence that for him it would be just a piece of cake, although the girl had thought all her life that her injury could no longer be cured, and the teacher said that for him it was a mere trifle. According to Zhang, he called her here specifically to cure her, and to begin with, he would like her to relax her body and sit down. At this moment, Wang Yin noticed that for some unknown reason, she suddenly began to trust her new teacher. At some point, her thoughts were interrupted by Zhang, who, completely unexpectedly for the girl, threw a small needle at her. The girl immediately thought that this was a technique that required strict control over the flight of the needle so that it would hit the target accurately, and this technique was known as air acupuncture. But this technique required at least the 5th rank. That's why she couldn't believe that the worst teacher in the university could even reach 5th place. But Zhang had been continuing to perform his technique all this time, and he had only just begun the stage of introducing true qi into Wang Yin's body. It was an incredibly painful process, and the girl had to endure it. But the thought that this was indeed the teacher's qi was still spinning in her head. She immediately realized that this was the purest qi, like spring water without a single impurity, flowing through her body. But she still couldn't get the fact out of her head that such energy simply couldn't be found in a 3rd-rank master. Moreover, no matter how much she studied the matter, she had never heard of such a true qi refining mastery. Anyway, the most important thing now is that she can feel her legs more accurately and clearly than ever. Wang Yin felt like he had turned some kind of lever, and now she could feel them. The girl had been waiting for this feeling for so long, and finally, when she had almost lost hope that she would ever be able to cure this disease, the teacher was still able to cure her, and he did it so simply that she could not even believe it. For such a gift, she immediately fell to her knees in front of him and began to thank him. Zhang thought that there was no particular meaning to it. He just wanted the girl to start training hard so that the second one would not be so easily corrupted. After his first training session, Yan, sitting with all the students in the class, told them how he was going to leave the teacher. So he wanted to know who wanted to join him, and the big guy immediately supported him. But he still added that, in addition to the fact that he also wanted to leave, he was afraid that the teacher might get angry about this, and then things would be bad for them. Jan thought it was a mere trifle because it was better to be angry than just stay here. He was confused by the fact that they didn't even know what rank he was, but he was sure that when Wang Yin came out, she would finally convince them that they should leave him. Immediately after his words, Zhang and Wang Yin entered the waiting room. It was clear from the girl that she was very pleased, and with such an attitude, she clearly did not intend to leave. Jan noticed this, and realized that his escape plan was slowly beginning to fall apart. The big guy also noted the fact that Wang Yin clearly didn't look disappointed, but Yang couldn't believe that Zhang actually told Wang Yin something worthwhile. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by Zhao Yao, who entered the classroom and first apologized for being late. Zhang, of course, was very happy to see her, but he couldn't help but ask the girl who was this disabled person next to her. The girl did not expect such a formulation, and was a little stunned when she heard the word disabled. But the man who was next to the girl did not tolerate this and immediately responded by calling Zhang a cripple, because in fact his name was Yao Han and he was a servant of the Bayun house. He also added that he came here to check on Zhang and how he would handle this lesson. Zhao tried her best to calm him down, but it seemed to be quite difficult to do. Zhang, in turn, decided to add fuel to the fire and said that he actually needed absolute silence in the classroom in order to teach, and besides, he believed that it was not a public place where anyone could enter. Zhang gently hinted that he should leave here, which made Uncle Zhao even more angry, and so he immediately began to threaten Zhang, saying that he could slap him right now. The teacher did not argue with him and asked Zhao to deal with her relative herself. Zhao immediately sent Han out of the classroom and told him that he was disturbing her while she was studying. A few seconds later, the doors closed in front of the man, and he apparently would not be able to watch his niece's occupation. And when Zhao finally dealt with her uncle, Zhang decided to call Yang to him, because it was his turn. The guy happily agreed because he really wanted to see what his new teacher was capable of, and he also decided that if Zhang really was as bad as everyone said, then the guy would quit without hesitation. He entered Zhang's room, and the first thing he did was ask the teacher if he wanted Yang to show him what he could do. But before he could finish his question, Zhang told him that it was actually useless, and that he had already figured it out. Zhang explained to the young master that at the moment the Feijoa strike was at the initial level, although the Kulong strike was at an advanced level. Yang was a little surprised that Zhang knew that he was practicing Kunlun, because absolutely no one knows about this training, not even his family. Zhang replied with a smile that it was actually quite simple. Yesterday he saw Feijoa in his style and ate it. This shocked the boy even more. He couldn't believe that Zhang was even able to see such a thing. In his mind, he remembered that even teacher Qiao Xiong hadn't seen anything like this. How could Zhang have guessed back then? His thoughts were interrupted by Zhang, who assured the boy that every time he used the Kunlun strike, the pain in the boy's armpit increased and his shoulder began to itch. At this moment, Zhang amazed Yang so much that he even cried out upon hearing such detailed information about himself. The body of a Kunlun technique master is perceived as the body of a dragon, and if the warrior has reached the rank of skin and bone purification, there will be no side effects, since the qi energy will nourish the muscles and bones of its wearer. But according to Zhang, Yang is only at the second wind level now, and his body is still too weak, so the Kunlun is injuring him, and if he continues, the injury will become even worse. Yang was speechless, and clearly didn't know what he had said to his teacher. He simply remained silent, and waited for Zhang to continue. So the teacher kept saying that if he continued like this, his arm would atrophy, and it would be impossible to save it. Zhang also suspected that the boy was already at the stage where his sleep was disturbed, and at night the spasm was felt throughout his entire arm. Jan realized that he was in trouble, so without thinking twice, he knelt down in front of his teacher and began to ask him for help. Zhang went down to him, and the first thing he did was ask him not to worry so much, because in fact, the solution to the problem was quite simple. He just needed to stop using Kunlun and focus on his rank for now, and Zhang would definitely find a solution to this problem. There was so much hope in Zhang's eyes, and in his head he was thinking about how wrong he was, but now he understands how lucky he is, because his new teacher is the best. The other boys waited impatiently for Yang to leave Zhang's room, and finally he came out, and they waited for him to decide that the guy would leave this teacher. But Yan, upon hearing these words, immediately pounced on the big guy to tell him that he really didn't understand what he was talking about. He then added that if he had been destined to learn from this man, that was exactly what he would have done, and now that he was here, he saw no point in retreating. The boys' faces were far from normal. They did not even try to hide their surprise. Next in line was Zhao, who couldn't believe Zhang's words when he said she had a yin body. The man also added that she was far from being ill, but simply had a body that most women in the world dream of. He told her that her body had a lot of yin energy, and with the right training, her progress would be much faster. The only thing Zhang regretted was that no one had noticed this before, and she had been practicing white jade kung fu all this time, and considering that she was adding yin energy to her own, this could only mean one thing: she was on a direct path to illness. He believed that the only way to get rid of the pain was to change his training method to one that suited it better. Zhao began to worry, because she didn't know any other teaching methods except her own. Zhang reassured her, saying that there was really no problem with it. Tomorrow he would go to the library and try to find something for her. Next in line was a big guy who came out of the office just as pleased and grateful to Zhang for his help. He never thought that he would have to kneel before Zhang for helping him so much. Zhang understands his emotions because he gave him the adjusted Hongting 9 Paths method, although he still felt that the big guy was getting too close to him. As for Zhang Yang, his strength increased greatly after his advice, and the boy was finally able to reveal his talent, after which he went out to the guys to tell them that he had analyzed almost all of their individual recommendations, but assured them that this was only the beginning, because they clearly would not be able to achieve success with simple words. Suddenly his monologue was interrupted when someone knocked down the classroom door. Brother Wang Yin said that Zhang was deceiving the students for his own benefit, but he would not tolerate him dragging his sister into it. This guy's name was Wang Tao, and he said that he wanted Zhang to stop being Wang Yin and Zhao Yao's teacher and let them go immediately. Otherwise, he immediately warned him that he would not pay attention to his title as a teacher and that he would be to blame for his injuries, to which Zhang only replied that this guy was disrupting the lesson. Wang Tao smiled because he didn't understand what Zhang could teach his students since his skills were laughable, and he didn't forget to add that Zhang was lucky that he was well-mannered and called him a teacher, but this would continue if Zhang continued to fool around. Zhang got tired of this and created a huge fire tiger, which scared Wang Tao quite a bit. He immediately noticed that this aura was the same as that of an elder. He didn't believe that a third-rank guy could be so strong, so he thought that it would be disgusting if they thought that he was afraid of such a weakling. So without thinking twice, he decided to attack Zhang and punish him for all the words and actions he had committed. But no matter how much force Wang Tao used, Zhang was still able to easily stop the guy's attack with just 2 fingers. Wang Tao couldn't even imagine how this was even possible. How could a third-rank fighter stop his attack and so easily? He decided that it was just a coincidence, and nothing more, so he demanded that Zhang let go of the sword so that they could fight in a fair fight. Zhang didn't listen to him, but continued to just stand there and wait for Wang Tao to simply leave and not interfere with his lesson. At that moment, the guy's head was spinning with only thoughts about how this was simply impossible, because the last time they tested Zhang's strength, it was at the level of the 3rd rank. Moreover, the guy believed that even if he had strengthened, he should now only be at the 1st stage of the 4th rank. But apparently this was not the case, because Zhang was able to throw Wang Tao out of the classroom with just 1 hand. Uncle Zhao stood outside the door of this classroom and listened carefully to what was happening in the classroom, and at some point, he began to hear a very loud noise, and so it seemed to him that Wang Tao was finally going to teach Zhang a lesson. And he clearly wanted to see this more than anything else, so he carefully opened the classroom doors. But apparently he did it in vain, because as soon as he opened the doors, he saw the body of a fighter flying towards him. It so happened that they landed on the ground together and together received the gift from Zhang. After he had sorted out his fans, to put it mildly, he decided it was time for them to continue their activities. The boys apparently still couldn't come to their senses after what they had seen. It seemed to them that it was a 4th-rank supreme power. Brother Wang Yin was defeated so easily, even though he is a famous fighter. How could a teacher from the bottom of the rankings do this? They all came to the conclusion that Teacher Zhang had simply been hiding his strength all this time. Uncle Zhao Yao, after such a not-so-soft landing, would like to ask Mr. Wang Tao what happened and why he was unable to teach Zhang a lesson. Wang Tao couldn't think of anything better to say than that he had just used a new technique and was just lucky because he hadn't fully mastered it yet. So today, he said, luck was on Zhang's side. His interlocutor thought that something was clearly wrong here, and even with the new technique, Wang Tao should have won. The guy also decided to add that the university had a strict rule not to interrupt classes, so he decided to wait a little. The man agreed with him, and added that since they had some free time, he wanted to ask Wang Tao something, and the guy didn't mind talking, but he mentally asked that the topic of their conversation not concern Zhang. And his question was that he wanted to know if there was a teacher named B in this academy, and if she had any admirers. Wang Tao was the first to notice that the name had the word B in it, so he immediately assumed that it was Shen Biju, who was the local ideal of beauty, and therefore had many admirers, the most obvious of which was Shang Bing. But he also did not forget to mention that Zhang was also chasing after her. Hearing this, the man thought that now all he had to do was find out whether they really had a conflict back then. Shang Bing sat in his office and listened to Qiao's stories, who told him that Zhang had deceived his disciple, and so he decided to turn to the grandson of the academy elder. Shang Bing slammed his palm on the table and immediately told him to forget about it, because he was going to solve this problem himself. In his words, he had always wanted to teach this Zhang a lesson, but deep down he knew that if he attacked him there, it would lower him in the eyes of the precious Shen Biju. But now he had a good reason. And now he is ready to do everything for this. And as an assistant, he decided to take Qiao with him because he was going to make a cripple out of him. When they arrived at Zhang's classroom, they saw Wang Tao standing there, and next to him was an unknown man. The first thing Shang Bing wanted to ask Wang Tao was why he was here and not training. Wang Tao decided that there was nothing to hide, so he told them that his sister had been tricked into going to see the teacher, and that he had come here to sort it out. Shang Bing was quite surprised that Zhang dared to lie even to Madame Wang, and now he was more than sure that this guy needed to be put in his place. Wang Tao also introduced Mrs. Zhao's family assistant, Yao Han, whose ward was also deceived. Shang Bing's face changed even more when he heard that Zhang had managed to deceive the Yao family as well. In that case, he decided that they needed to go together and teach this scoundrel a lesson for everything he had done. Meanwhile, Zhang told his students that the 9 paths system of Hongting, although basic, still had many shortcomings. This was the first time that the boys listened so attentively to someone's lecture, and all because they really found it very educational, because he could point out the shortcomings of even the most effective methods. Some of the boys even thought that even his father could not compare to Teacher Zhang in teaching. Suddenly he was interrupted again by the same people, but now Shang Bing was with them, taking Qiao with him. Zhang didn't understand what they were doing here, but he guessed that since they came here so happy, it meant that they clearly weren't going to praise him. Shang Bing spoke first, saying that he didn't expect Zhang to stoop to deceit, and he still couldn't believe that he had deceived Miss Wang Yin and Miss Zhao Yao. Zhang was tired of enduring all these senseless accusations and suspicions, so he immediately replied to Shang Bing that if he had any business with him, he would listen to him after class. But Shang Bing didn't seem to hear him and continued walking, only to say at one point that he wanted Zhang to let those disciples go right now, otherwise he would have to force him. Zhang didn't want to let anyone go, so he decided to first ask Shang Bin what he was going to do, since he felt that the respected Shang Bin didn't know that fighting between teachers was prohibited in Hongting. Shang Bing told him that the university rules were made to maintain order within these walls, but he was breaking them, so for his sake, Shang Bing would make an exception. Zhang knew that he was probably doing this because he was hurt by the words spoken to him yesterday, and so Zhang felt that Shen Biju would be angry when he found out about this. Shang Bin was surprised that he wanted to catch him doing this. In any case, he had already decided to teach him a lesson, so he didn't care about such nonsense. Uncle Zhao was shocked by what he saw, because he realized that this was the same Shang Bing, Shen Biju's admirer, and he was the one who had a conflict with Zhang yesterday, so after connecting all these facts, the man guessed that this was the person who hit him last night. Therefore, without thinking twice, he decided to take revenge on this scoundrel who attacked him from behind. Shang Bin clearly didn't understand what was going on and immediately asked Han to calm down, as he had no idea why he had just been hit. Han didn't understand why he was even asking him about this, as if he didn't understand that he deserved it. Shang Bin really didn't understand what was going on, but he still told Han that if he hit him again, he would hit him back. But before he could finish speaking, Khan immediately pounced on him and began to literally beat him for what he had to endure yesterday. Qiao and Wang Tao also didn't understand what was going on and why Han suddenly went berserk and started beating Shang Bin. Zhang stood aside at that moment and enjoyed the fact that his plan worked as it should have, and the fight began exactly when he needed it to. Wang Tao decided to stop Han so that he would finally tell what happened, to which the man suddenly decided to attack Shang Bin, but Han continued to break free from his hands. He said that he was not finished yet. Shang Bin's face was too swollen. It was obvious that he was in a lot of pain, but even in this state, he threatened to take revenge on Han for everything he had done to him. At one point in the argument, Zhang intervened and told them that if they had any disagreements, they could resolve them outside his classroom, and that they should leave his classroom immediately, or he would be forced to contact the education department. Shang Bing knew that his condition was too bad, and he really needed to leave because it would be embarrassing if anyone found out about it. He agreed to leave, but still did not forget to add that they would still get theirs, so he asked them not to rejoice. After the lesson ended, the children finally walked out of the classroom in a great mood, because they found today's lesson exciting. They especially liked the part with the teacher and the servant of the Yao family, and Teacher Zhang's strength was a real revelation to them. Zhao couldn't even imagine what could have happened to Uncle Han and why he wore a bandage, and it was quite difficult for the man to explain all of this to her. As soon as Wang Ying walked out of the classroom, her brother grabbed her hand and immediately ordered her to go home with him. She didn't quite understand why she needed to go anywhere if she was now living at the school, but he wasn't going to explain it to her because it wasn't up for discussion, so he repeated to her again that they were going home immediately. Meanwhile, Shang Bing was walking down the academy's corridor, almost screaming about how he was beaten for literally nothing. Qiao guessed that perhaps Zhang was in cahoots with Han. He agreed with him because Shang Bing hadn't actually done anything to be punished for, so he was sure that he had attacked him, because he wanted to teach Zhang a lesson. After which, he suddenly wanted to ask Qiao again if Zhang was really forcibly teaching Yang, because it was impossible to tell from the guy that he was sitting there forcibly. Chow once again assured Mr. Shangbing, having no doubt that it was true. Shangbing was happy to hear this, so since Chow was so confident, he suggested that he immediately apply for the will detector. He also asked Chow to remember to increase the penalty to the maximum, as he believed that this was the best way to put Zhang in his place. In the Wang family mansion, the girl was yelled at very loudly because her father thought that she didn't even understand what she had done. He wanted to hear her opinion about his teacher. He wanted to know if she knew that he was the worst teacher in the entire academy. The girl immediately tried to assure her father that teacher Zhang was not as bad as everyone thought, and that he was actually very talented. Her father didn't believe her, but the girl confirmed it with a smile. So he had to turn around and start yelling at her again, because he thought Zhang was only capable of raising trash like himself, and so his father didn't understand why she even thought he was fit to be her teacher. Moreover, he didn't even think that such problems could arise with her. He asked the girl again with all his anger if she knew what place her teacher occupied in the ranking. The elders of the family who were behind all this advised the girl to listen to the chief. They believed that he would definitely not say anything bad, and as an example, they decided to give her Wang Yang, who studied with Lu Sen. According to them, the guy's strength increased by 40% in just one lesson. Wang Yin, overcoming her fear and embarrassment, decided to say that with teacher Zhang, her strength had increased by more than 100%, and he was also able to heal her legs. One of the elders refused to believe this, because he believed that if their most famous doctor, invited from distant lands, could not cure the girl, then this scoundrel would not be able to do the same. The other elder also laughed when he heard that she had increased her strength by 100%, and the healing of his legs captivated him even more, after which they asked her not to lie, if only to cover up for this liar. At some point, she decided to shut them up and started shouting about how they could even talk like that about teacher Zhang if they had never even seen him, and she had already firmly decided that she refused to leave his class. But this made the old men laugh even more. They assumed that the girl had some other reasons for protecting this guy. The girl's father also thought that he was talking complete nonsense and ordered her to leave classes that very day, otherwise the doors of this house would be closed to her. Without thinking twice, she left the house, hearing her father shouting after her that if she left, she would never be able to return. But the girl was not going to go anywhere. She approached the column that measures strength and said that if they did not believe her, then she would gladly prove it to them with actions. Having gathered her strength a little, she decided to deliver the first kick. She was able to knock out a full 205 units of strength, which surprised all the elders, because they were sure that yesterday her strength was only 53 units, and what is even more surprising is that her legs work as they should. After which Wang Yin immediately added that if it weren't for teacher Zhang, she would never have been able to achieve such a result. The father couldn't believe his eyes. Could he really cure her legs? The girl confirmed this information, after which the man immediately wanted to know what teacher Zhang said in his lecture. The girl was ready to tell him about it without any problem, but she immediately stated that teacher Zhang was talking about deep things, and therefore she could not remember everything. After listening to his daughter, Wang Yin's father simply couldn't understand how he could teach the first rank so subtly. The elders also realized that Zhang had truly delivered a genuine lecture from a master of his craft, and they now clearly looked at studying it in a new way. They even thought about what would have happened if they had heard it at that time. How many heights could they have reached? In any case, her father was so impressed that he ordered his daughter not to leave this teacher under any circumstances. Moreover, he asked the girl to ask Zhang if he could accept other fighters, and if the man himself could attend some of his lectures. The elders immediately reminded the man that he was the head of the clan, and he could not simply become a disciple of such a person, because then their family might think something wrong. Father realized that they were actually right, and it was clearly not the best idea for him. But the elders themselves were not against attending a few lectures of this teacher, so they politely asked Wang Yin to ask permission. Meanwhile, Zhang decided to visit the library again, as he believed that although his skills had improved greatly, he still knew little about martial arts, and so he decided that he needed to study now. Otherwise, he would not be able to properly teach his students. He came to Reverend Mo again, and said that this time he wanted to look at the martial arts materials, but the elder told him that today was not the best time for that. Before Zhang could ask what was going on, he was suddenly interrupted by Shen, who had also come to the library to borrow some books, and the elder happily let her in. After which Zhang turned to Venerable Mo again to say that it was unfair, since he and Teacher Shen had the same goal, to read the book, and he did not understand why he was not allowed, but she was allowed. The thing is that the elder believed that Shen was really looking for knowledge, but he came here for an unknown reason. Zhang had to start proving that he also came here for knowledge. Shen, at that moment, did not understand why Zhang did not talk to her. Did he really stop liking her? In any case, she decided to support Zhang and told Venerable Mo that she was confident that Teacher Zhang had no evil intentions, and so she suggested that he also let him in, especially since, as a teacher, he had every right to do so. The elder decided that since Shen insisted on it, he would let Zhang into the library, but he immediately warned him that if he saw Zhang breaking the rules again, he himself would be to blame and would also bear responsibility. Zhang was glad to hear this and then decided to thank Shen for his help. Then he simply entered the library without talking to Shen. This confused the girl, as she thought that Zhang would take the opportunity to talk to her. Zhang didn't even expect that getting into the library would be so difficult, and he understood perfectly well that next time he would definitely not be allowed in there. But then he looked around and realized that this library was not really that big, and if he tried, he could go through all the books in one day. Elder Mo heard the noise in the library again, and realized that Zhang had apparently returned to his old habits, even though he had said that it would not happen again. He decided to go into the library and check out what was going on there, and at that moment the thought flashed through his head that he wouldn't mind finding out what was going on in this guy's head. The old man noticed that Zhang was taking everything in a row and trying to read everything at once, and this once again confirmed that the old man was right, and the guy was just doing something incomprehensible. So he decided that when Zhang decided to leave here, then he would teach him a lesson. At this moment, Shen was also watching Zhang closely, and now she began to understand why Elder Mo didn't want to let him into the library. Although on the other hand, she had the thought that Zhang simply found out that the girl wanted to come to the library today and was simply trying to attract her attention. So she decided that she wouldn't let him wreak havoc in the library just because he decided to see her. The first thing she wanted to know from Teacher Zhang was what he did, to which she received the obvious answer. He told her that he was just reading. She became even more angry about this, so she decided to tell him that he definitely didn't look any more attractive this way, and she didn't like the way he was acting, so she asked him to leave the library immediately. Zhang told her that he could imagine how difficult it was for her, but he still continued to pretend that he didn't hear her and continued to read all the books in a row. Shen was already very angry and started yelling at him that he apparently didn't understand what she told him, so she decided to repeat that if he continued to do this, then this way he definitely wouldn't attract her attention. Zhang was tired of listening to her nonsense and asked this crazy woman not to disturb him, and if she was so bored, she could always go to the corner and draw there. The main thing he asked was to leave her alone. The girl couldn't believe that Zhang was talking to her like that, but still, the thought was spinning in her head that he was just joking, and that's why she wanted to see how long he could hold out. In the end, 6 hours had already passed, and Zhang was still leafing through the books, and the girl finally realized that if he wanted to attract her attention, he would clearly stop doing this. During this time, Zhang still managed to do the impossible. He still transferred all the books to the library of the Heavenly Path. Furthermore, during all this time, he was finally able to find a suitable training method for Zhao Yao. Turning around, he noticed that Xin was still there, even though it was already around 7 o'clock in the evening. But on the other hand, he realized that he actually didn't care about her at all. And since he had done everything he wanted, it was time for him to go back. But suddenly, just before leaving, Elder Mo stopped him and told Zhang that he was not going anywhere. After which the elder told him that from now on, he was forbidden to enter this library, and he really wanted Zhang not to return here again. Zhang pretended to be surprised by this, and asked the old man the reason for this decision. Elder Mo started yelling at him because he immediately realized that Zhang was just leafing through the books instead of reading them carefully, and that he never took any notes, so he thought the man was just having fun. Zhang understood that the old man was essentially angry because he read too fast. But on the other hand, Zhang understood that he no longer needed to go to the library, so on the other hand, he didn't care what this old man said. And with such thoughts, he replied to Mo, saying that he was completely right, and Zhang would quickly leave here. Just as he was about to leave, Shen suddenly asked him to stay. She left the library saying that he read quite a lot, and she was very interested to know if he had managed to remember anything at all. Zhang didn't fully understand what she was telling him and what it all meant. She immediately started telling him that she had just seen him reading 8 ways to improve medicines, so she wanted to ask him about the contents of the book. Deep down, she was sure the man was just pretending to read, so now she just wanted to see how he would get out of it. Zhang unexpectedly agreed to answer her questions, but asked her to do it as quickly as possible, as he was in a hurry for dinner. She was annoyed that he was doing this just to get her to leave him alone, but she asked her question anyway, the gist of which was that if you use all the herbs separately, it might be difficult to make the pills, so it was better to mix all the ingredients at once. And the question was that she didn't understand the meaning of this phrase. Jin sighed and said that she remembered it wrongly, because it would be correct to say that only the correct order of adding the herbs would help her make quality pills, but the meaning of this phrase is that the ingredients must be added separately and in a specific order. The girl was surprised by his answer, because in fact, she initially made a mistake in the phrase in order to expose him, but she did not even suspect that he would be able to give her the correct answer. But she also understood perfectly well that it would be impossible to do this if he had not really read this book. She didn't know what to say until Elder Mo intervened and asked a question about the book. He wanted to know how Zhang understood the phrase, "Qi travels through the body, the mind travels through the world." The old man knew very well that the 8 ways to improve medicines were a foundation that had been mastered by more than 1 generation of doctors, and even if he had not studied this material, it could easily be heard from other sources. Zhang, in turn, was surprised that such an old man did not understand such a simple expression, because it was so simple. He then explained that this meant that as qi travels and fills the body, so the mind cognizes the world, filling it with knowledge and subordinating it to skills. According to Zhang, this phrase is from the treatise Qi and Blood, the author of which is Taming. In this book, it can be found in the 27th row on the 69th page. Elder Mo's surprise was obvious. The whole thing was that one elder asked him about this, but he couldn't answer. And even later, that old man couldn't find an explanation in the library, so he just couldn't understand how this guy got to this point. In any case, he clearly didn't trust him, so he decided to go and check this information himself. After a while, they found the very row where the book was, and then opened the page that Zhang pointed to and read exactly the same thing that the man said, which surprised them even more. Mo mentally repeated that the old man had not found the answer, turning the entire library upside down. He could not find this book and the answer to the question. But Zhang not only managed to find it, but also read it, and most importantly, understood what was written here. While they were looking for this book, Zhang decided that he didn't have time to just look at them, and he needed to leave quickly, because at this rate he might not make it in time for dinner. But Shen decided to stop him again. Elder Mo almost passed out from the realization of what he had learned. Questions were spinning in his head about why this guy was the worst teacher back then, because with such abilities he could clearly be the best of the best. Zhang asked Shen to speak up quickly about what she needed because, as he had already said, he was late for dinner, and Shen suddenly noticed the fact that she hadn't eaten for a long time either. Zhang mentally asked her not to say that she had just asked him this question only to propose having dinner together later, so he decided to answer her that if she was so hungry, then what did she want from him? She couldn't accept the fact that so many people were inviting her to dinner, and she was turning them all down, and when she gave Zhang a chance, he turned her down anyway. She overcame herself and invited him to have dinner together. Zhang clearly showed no interest until the girl suddenly said that she would treat him to dinner. He was always happy when he was treated, so he immediately agreed, but immediately warned her that he ate a lot. This was Shen's first meeting with a guy like Zhang, because before that, she had obviously met other guys who invited her and paid for her. The Library of the Heavenly Path could see the disadvantages and advantages of techniques, allowing one to read the opponent's weaknesses like a book, but it could not reveal the heart of a woman to Zhang Huang. He did not understand that with just a few words, he had brought the first beauty of the academy to a panic attack. Shen also noticed that this guy spent half a day with her, but never spoke to her, and when she turned to him to ask something, she noticed some kind of aura appear around him. After some time, she realized that this was the second rank of the power of the mind, which was called the calmness of the waters. Martial arts masters develop not only the body, but also the mind. The higher the rank of fortitude, the greater the learning ability and ability to perceive and process information, but as you know, the mind is much more difficult to train than the body. It is difficult to subdue, and only the head of the academy has achieved such a rank of mind. And considering all these facts, Shen realized that his teacher test results were simply fake, and he did it in order to comprehend the second rank of reason with the help of other people's reproaches and bullying. She realized that this guy was essentially a real tiger in pig skin, whom she would try to tear to pieces. Zhang thought at this moment that he had simply decided that it was a beautiful place, but now he realized that he had obtained the second rank of intelligence. He was very happy to realize this, because he was reborn into a new life. Moreover, thanks to the new training method, his body was filled with the purest qi, so it was no longer a surprise to him. With these thoughts, they quickly reached the very restaurant where they were to have dinner today. At this moment, Zhang thought that he had always eaten in small restaurants and canteens, so he didn't expect that she would bring him here, and Shen at this moment thought that she was incredibly curious to know how long Zhang would continue to pretend. Today, Qiao and Shangbin were relaxing in the same restaurant, and he was still very angry about the situation that happened to him, but Qiao asked him to calm down because they had already applied for the will detector. Therefore, all that was left was to wait for the moment when they would be punished for what they had done, although Shangbin understood that the heavenly lion was his grandfather's favorite, and he would hardly be able to control it. But Qiao thought that there was no need for that, since they could just give him something to drink and eat, and then it would be much easier for them. At that moment, they were brought their order, which they had been waiting for quite a long time. Shangbing also told the restaurant owner that he had a lion living in his backyard, and he wanted to be fed. Afterwards, Qiao told him that he heard that Hongting Pavilion was a very prestigious restaurant, and its owner had always been cold to his customers, but now, for some reason, it was the opposite. Shang explained to him that the pavilion was so famous because its creator, Hong Tao, was a powerful and influential man. The only thing Shang did not understand was why Hong Tao was not one of the elders of the academy. As for their warm welcome, it's all because his grandfather was a good friend of Hong Hao's, and so his family is always welcome here. Qiao suddenly interrupted Shan and asked him to look in the other direction, where he thought Zhang and Shen Bi were walking. And he turned out to be right, because it really was her. But what was she doing here, and with this loser too? Shan didn't forget to note that he had invited her here so many times, but she still didn't agree. Qiao felt very sorry for the gentleman, but he immediately asked him not to despair, because, according to him, he knew how to open Madame Shenbi's eyes and show what a scumbag Zhang really was, and in the same way they could raise his authority in her eyes. After a while, Zhang was very happy because he had not eaten so deliciously for a long time. The food was incredibly delicious. Shen was a little upset because Zhang had been eating all this time and hadn't paid any attention to her, so she wanted to ask for the bill for this dinner as soon as possible. The waiter happily came up to her to say that he hoped they enjoyed everything, and also to inform her that they only owed 1,280 coins. The girl clearly did not expect to hear such a number, because she was more than sure that they ordered a maximum of 100 coins. The man decided to explain to her with a smile that the thing was that they had ordered wine, which cost 1,200 coins. This surprised the girl even more, because they didn't order it. They just received this bottle, and she thought it was free. The waiter's face suddenly changed, and he started saying that it was quite logical that they had to pay for this wine, and he also thought that if she didn't ask how much it cost, then it wasn't their problem, but only hers. This was definitely a problem, as the girl did not have that amount of money with her, so she asked to transfer the amount to her account so that she could pay it back to them later. The waiter was not going to make any concessions, because he believed that if she could not afford this wine, then there was no point in ordering it. So he told her to give them their money back right now, because no one would feed them for free here. At this moment, teacher Shangbin approached them, and the first thing he asked was, what was going on here. The waiter smiled again and told the man that there had been an incident and that the people had eaten but were unable to pay for their order. Shang Bin immediately turned to Zhang and told him that if he didn't have money, there was no point in pretending to have it because it would only bring shame to their academy. Zhang immediately asked him to stop saying such things in front of everyone, especially since it was not true. But Xin Bin was clearly not deterred, and continued to say that he never thought that Zhang could stoop to such a level as to pretend to be such a generous person. Although at that moment he thought that it was he who asked to serve Zhang an overly expensive drink that he could not pay for when he looked like a nobody. Then he, Shang, should have come and saved the beautiful Shen. This way, he will do everything in one go, punish Zhang, and finally get Shen. But apparently, he hadn't thought his plan through to the end, because Shen made it clear that she didn't like anything Shang Bin was doing now. He thought she had taken it personally, so he decided to explain again that he had said all this about teacher Zhang, and that he specifically didn't have any money, but he still treated her like that, and it was somehow embarrassing. At that very moment, Zhang decided to intervene in their dialogue to say that it was not he who was treating her, but teacher Shen, who had decided to treat Zhang. Shan clearly didn't expect such a turn of events. It seemed literally impossible to him. After all, he invited her to dinner every day, but she refused, and now suddenly she decided to invite this bitch herself? In any case, he would have to make things right somehow, because Shen was clearly very angry that Shang told her that she was pretending to be magnanimous and that it was a disgrace to the teacher. Chao tried to push him from the side and told Shan that it was even better this way because now he could offer to pay the bill for her, and then everything would be fine. Without thinking twice, he decided to listen to his friend's advice, immediately put a bag of coins on the table and told the waiter that he would pay Miss Shen's bill. At that moment, he immediately thought that this would definitely calm Shenbi down. Moreover, he even thought that she liked him, but apparently his thoughts were too premature, because at some point Shen simply took off the necklace and said that she didn't need it and was ready to pay herself, so as not to pretend to be generous. She took off what turned out to be a jade pendant worth about 5,000 coins and offered it to the waiter as payment, although later she changed her mind and said that she would leave it only as collateral, so that she could buy it back later. Shang Bing immediately turned to Qiao to ask him what to do next, because things were clearly not going according to plan. Suddenly this whole farce was interrupted by Zhang, who assured the girl that there was actually no need to give up such a valuable thing as collateral, after which he got up from his seat and went to the waiter, telling him that in fact this food was not that expensive, and besides, she was trying to get revenge on him for deceiving her so maliciously. These words outraged the waiter, because according to him, they had a prestigious restaurant and an honest place, and there was no point in talking about any deception here. So he promised them that after such words, they would definitely not leave here unpunished. Shang Bing and Chao were happy to see the waiter and what appeared to be the owner of the place get furious, and they were now sure that Zhang would be in trouble. Shen, who was also standing behind him, didn't understand why he even said all that, since she knew very well how influential this restaurant was, and it was obvious that he would get into trouble if he continued like this. Zhang also decided not to remain silent, and told the restaurant owner that since he was telling him such things, he would not mind telling him why he was so unhappy. The first thing he mentioned was the fragrant violet-infused bear meat. To make this dish, you have to marinate the bear meat in violet extract for at least 3 days, but Zhang says they marinate it for only half a day, and then fry it to get at least a hint of the flavor. Zhang believed that the extract had not penetrated the meat at all, so ordering the dish was essentially throwing money away. As he told this story, people gathered around and listened attentively to the story of how they were being deceived. Zhang clearly wasn't going to stop there, and went on to explain how the Honghu guppies they pass off as wild were actually captive bred, as you can tell from their small, thin fins and tail. The waiter became more and more angry with every word, but his anger was connected with the fact that Zhang was actually right, and he really did substitute all these products behind the back of his superiors. But it was difficult to notice even for a professional gourmet, so the man could not even imagine how Zhang managed to figure this out. He decided to deny all of this, and so the first thing he did was start yelling at Zhang that he was talking complete nonsense, and everything he was saying was just a coincidence, and if he was going to accuse him of this, he was going to demand solid evidence. But in his mind, he knew that if he admitted this, the restaurant's reputation would be ruined. Zhang decided to prove to everyone around him that this man was lying, and the first thing he did was take a vessel of wine and start pouring it out. Then he took out a fire and said that since this wine was so expensive, they could easily test it. He set fire to the liquid he had just poured out and said that he would be very sorry to pay so much money for such a poor quality fake. Not only was the wine burning, but it was also spreading a smell throughout the restaurant that was so disgusting that at some point all the diners covered their noses to avoid smelling it. And Zhang at this time summed up that the taste really resembles drunken immortality. If you drink it, then it brings benefits. But in this bottle there was a drink that only brings harm, and this stench is the best proof of that. A few minutes after Zhang's speech, everyone around him started demanding that the restaurant return their money, and the owner couldn't even imagine how this could happen. The waiter thought that Shan told him that the guy was a loser, but then how could such a loser understand all his tricks? After all, he spoke as if he was a professional chef anyway. He knew that if his superiors found out about this, he would be in big trouble. Shang didn't understand what had just happened at all, but Chow couldn't explain anything either. The owner of this restaurant at some point realized that in fact these two people who set him up with this wine were to blame for everything, so his anger towards them went through the roof. So at some point he couldn't take it anymore and asked these two to leave his restaurant immediately. They didn't understand what exactly they had done to make him react so harshly, but they knew that it was really best to leave because it seemed like the man had gone crazy. Zhang also suggested that Shen leave, as he felt that they would hardly get the bill. The girl at that moment was just thinking that teacher Zhang was really good, because he could so easily determine the quality of wine and food that she even assumed that he did so poorly on the teacher exam because he was honing his culinary skills. Zhang himself actually didn't expect that the Heavenly Path Library could determine the quality of dishes, but in any case, he had to be grateful for this ability, because otherwise, he would definitely find himself in an awkward situation. His thoughts were interrupted by Shen, who was incredibly grateful to him for saving her today. But suddenly she said that she couldn't just leave it like that, and so she was going to invite him to dinner again because they hadn't been able to do it. Zhang was not prepared for such a turn of events, and immediately told her that it was not worth doing, because he had eaten his fill for a whole year, although he would not mind having dinner with the Nettle girl, but he did not want to fight off her suitors later. He managed to surprise Shen again, because she never thought that someone would refuse her several times in a row. But then he managed to add that it was very good that they had just eaten together, and now it was time for him to go, and this literally finished off the girl. Suddenly, he was stopped by Shang, who ordered Zhang to stand in the place where he was now standing, and was going to make sure that Zhang would not leave here in one piece today. Shen immediately wanted to ask him what he was going to do and why he had rolled up his sleeves, but instead of answering, Shang asked the girl to step aside, because this should be decided only by him and teacher Zhang. But she wasn't going to do that, so Shang decided to shout at Zhang and tell him that if he were a real man, he wouldn't hide behind a woman's back. Although Zhang himself did not understand what was wrong with hiding behind a girl's back, moreover, he called it conflict resolution and saw nothing wrong with hiding behind a woman's back to calm her down. Once again, everything did not go according to Shan's plan. Moreover, Zhang managed to justify himself so bluntly that he simply could not answer him. But that was only the beginning, because then he turned around and said he was leaving and asked teacher Shen to calm the two down, because he didn't have time for that. At that moment, all he could think was that they were complete fools if they thought they could provoke him with this, because he was a transmigrator from one world to another and had been through so much that they definitely couldn't surprise him with this. Shangbin continued to order him to stand still and also added that if Zhang died today, he would not have the right to bear his surname. Zhang wasn't going to listen to this madman, so without thinking, Shang summoned the heavenly lion, and then he ordered this animal to destroy Zhang, and if he did so, then Shang promised to feed him every day. Shen did not understand why he was doing this, because he knew very well that destroying a teacher was a terrible crime for which he would face a terrible punishment. Shang told her that teacher Zhang was trying to kill him, and the lion was simply defending his master and accidentally counterattacked too strongly, and so it could be taken as self-defense, and no one would be able to tell him anything. After his words, the lion immediately ran to attack to carry out Shan's order. Shen understood what consequences this could lead to, so she obviously began to worry about Zhang. The girl fell to her knees in anxiety because she began to understand that she was to blame for all of this. Shang Bin interrupted her thoughts by yelling at the girl that Zhang was definitely already dead and that there was no way to fix it, and all of this made him incredibly happy. But suddenly his euphoria was interrupted by Qiao, who noticed that something was clearly wrong here, and it was probably too early to rejoice. Shang started yelling at him because he was sure that this time everything was going according to plan, and there was no point in panicking, but Qiao asked him to just look over there, and everything would become clear at once. But when Shang finally looked in that direction, he realized that Qiao was indeed right, because Zhang had literally tamed the huge heavenly lion, which was definitely not going to eat him now. Shang couldn't believe his eyes, because he always thought that the celestial lion was his grandfather's pet. This animal was very proud, and would get angry even when it was touched, let alone stroked on the head. So he didn't understand why this powerful animal was groveling before Zhang like a loyal dog. He decided to try his luck again, and ordered the heavenly lion to immediately gather and carry out the order, namely, to destroy Zhang. But the lion did not hear a single word of Shan. He enjoyed the presence of Zhang, who was scratching him. Teacher Zhang got tired of listening to this madman's screams, so he politely asked his new friend to shut him up. The Sky Lion was ready to destroy Xin without any problem, and therefore immediately attacked him. Qiao immediately ran to Shang Bin to ask how he was and if everything was okay with him. Shan literally cried because he didn't understand what was happening here, because this lion was his grandfather's pet, who always obeyed him, and now Zhang was like his master. The lion continued to flatter his new master, and Zhang himself was not averse to praising him and saying that he was a good boy. Shen was also very interested to ask Zhang how he managed to do this. According to Zhang, it was all quite simple. He thought that this heavenly lion was very accommodating, although he did not deny that Zhang simply seemed handsome to him, so he did not continue to attack him. Although Shen knew very well that he was a heavenly lion, and if he were to respect anyone of his own free will, it would be another male heavenly lion. Anyway, Zhang thought it was time for him to go home and say goodbye. He also told the lion to go home, and that they would definitely see him again. Zhang continued to be amazed in his mind at the capabilities of the heavenly library. He couldn't even imagine that it worked on animals, and as it turned out, this lion had many shortcomings, so it was easy to tame. Shen asked him not to leave so quickly, because he still hadn't explained to her why the lion listened to him. Zhang was tired of being followed by so many troubles, so he asked her to leave him alone as he really wanted to live a long life. At first she yelled at him because he spoke to her so rudely, but then she calmed down and said that she was not holding him back, and that he could go about his business. The same man from the restaurant was called in by management to be scolded and punished for siphoning off food for his own gain, and the man agreed with it, but still felt it important to add that the other guy was much worse because he said it in front of everyone, without hiding it, as if he had no respect for the real owners of the restaurant at all. His boss slammed the table and ordered him to shut up immediately, as he considered that this in no way justified his theft, which sooner or later someone would notice, and now he was giving him exactly 5 days to restore the good name of his establishment, and then he would forgive him for the deception, otherwise he would die. After which he still wanted to know who this guy was, and who gave him the right to publicly insult the Kuntian restaurant. The frightened waiter overcame his fear and said that the man was the last-ranked teacher and his name was Zhang Huang. The restaurant owner was very annoyed that this Zhang Huang dared to disgrace the reputation of his restaurant. Zhang was just walking around thinking at that moment that he never thought that one dinner could bring so much trouble anyway. He knew that he needed to forget about it as soon as possible, because he had other important things to do. For example, he needed to figure out how to advance to the 6th rank. But to his great regret, no ordinary teacher can simply gain access to information about the rank of opening chakras, because a copy of these documents can only be obtained with the permission of the elders, and on the last test, he only had the 3rd rank. And if he now makes such a request, he will simply become a guinea pig. Although, if he remembered correctly, there were many useful things sold in Tianquan City, including cultivation manuals, and if he could look through them, it would indeed solve many of his problems. So he decided to go immediately and check if his guesses were correct. He arrived at the Tianquan shopping district and was a little surprised that it was so lively, and it was probably because he didn't remember anything about the place. He was thinking that this guy was just a regular teacher with a small salary, so it was no surprise that he had never come here, even though they sold a lot of stuff here, but he honestly didn't remember what it was for. But for this, he now has a library, which he also decided to test on these products. As soon as he came closer to the product, the seller immediately turned to him and offered his help, and also did not forget to say that his product was of high quality, and he would definitely like it. He was literally ready to vouch for it. Zhang decided to take a look at one of the goods, and according to the seller, this bell was made by a real master, so it has an unusual effect and costs only 50 coins. The library also worked on the items, so Zhang found information that this bell actually causes dizziness when exposed for a long time and is effective against first-rank fighters. It was also said that it was made in Qing Yun's workshop. Zhang remained silent, so the seller decided to say that he could actually sell him the bell at a discount and thus give it to him for 20 coins. Zhang thought at this moment that he was actually lucky, because with the Heavenly Path library, he really didn't have to worry about buying a fake. Instead of buying the bell, Zhang decided to ask the seller if he had any ice grass for tanning. In response, the seller told him that Zhang was very lucky today because, according to him, he was the only one in the entire market who was selling this herb. And now he has 2 boxes with 5 plants in each. He charges 100 gold per plant. Zhang said he would first like to look at the product the man was offering him, and then perhaps buy it. After taking a closer look, the librarian made it clear to Zhang that this was indeed the same herb, and the seller had not lied to him. This herb grows on the tops of mountains. It loves sunlight very much, so it contains a lot of spiritual energy. He believed that the combination of hot and cold yin and yang was the perfect medicine for Zhao Yao's blocked points, but he was confused by one important point about this plant. One of the stems was dried out. Zhang first looked at the box and assumed that the seller had kept the plants in improper conditions. The guy assured him that the dried-out stem was normal, because he said he had made a career out of the herb and therefore knew how to handle it. And besides, the stem had always been like that, even when he had collected it. But he still told Zhang that if it bothered him so much, he could give him the flower for half price. Zhang continued to study these herbs at this time, and at some point he discovered the ancestral stem, which was known to produce medicine twice as effective as the regular stem. The most unpleasant thing is that if the seller had understood this, he would most likely have increased the price. But he still asked to pack this stem. At that moment, Zhang thought that with this herb the problem would be solved much faster, and he would not need any other ingredients. The seller carefully wrapped 1 stem of this flower and said that Zhang would give him 50 coins. But when it came to paying, Zhang realized that with this library he had completely forgotten about money. He didn't even have 10 coins in his pocket, let alone 50. Although he still decided to ask the seller to sell him this stem for 8 coins. Apparently, this really angered the seller, who considered Zhang to be an ordinary impudent fellow who had no respect for men's work, since he had actually risked his life to get the stem of this plant. After which the seller also added that although these flowers are not of the best quality, they are in any case medicinal, and their price is no less than 30 to 50 coins, and if he does not buy anything, then the seller is already going to call security. Zhang immediately stopped him and said that there was no need to call security because he was really interested in buying it. He just didn't have any money. But he wasn't a thief either. Zhang even suggested resolving the conflict in another way, where the seller would give him the flower for free. The guy couldn't believe that his new client was so impudent. Not only did he come here without money, but he also expected gifts. The seller decided to play a game and said that he would give him the flower for free only if Zhang made him believe that he was a sage. Zhang immediately told him that there was no need to call him that. He simply suggested hitting him. The seller had already begun to get noticeably angry, because it seemed to him that Zhang considered him a fool and a weakling, although the guy himself was sure that he could very easily crush Zhang. But the teacher very easily stopped his aggression, saying that if he was not mistaken, then the seller was from Pingyi. The guy was very surprised, because Pingyi is a small settlement near Tianquan City, And so he was sure that Zhang simply could not guess this, and he wanted to know how Zhang guessed that he was from there. Zhang immediately told him that he thought it didn't really matter how he knew. What was more important was that he had been bitten by a cold bamboo snake in Tianshuan Forest half a year ago. The guy eventually managed to survive, but due to the bite he was almost completely disfigured, and in addition to this, unfortunately, he became impotent. The salesman turned noticeably pale, because 6 months ago in Tianshuan Forest, he had indeed been bitten by a cold bamboo snake. But the guy couldn't even imagine how Zhang could have known about it if he had only told that girl from the brothel about it. Zhang looked at the guy with a smile, and at some point finally decided to say that if he lied, he would just turn around and leave. But then Zhang assured him that he would definitely never be able to feel like a man again, and also he would not have the right to later say that Zhang did not warn him. The salesman immediately perked up and asked Zhang if he really knew how to help him with his problem. Zhang smiled, and the guy started asking him for more help. If he knew the cure, then he literally started begging Zhang to give it to him, and then he could take everything he had on the shelves for free. Finally, the teacher got the desired words, and after that, finally, he added that the poison of the cold bamboo snake, getting into the body, freezes the organs, and this is a fact. Medicines are powerless here. For this reason, people often amputate their limbs. Even the most skilled alchemists can do nothing. But here's what's strange. Despite the chilling properties of this snake's body, its bile has a warming effect, so it's enough to absorb it, and it will completely cleanse the body of foreign cold, and it will be able to become human again. The guy couldn't believe that all he had to do was eat the bile of a bamboo snake. Was it really that simple? Zhang confirmed this information and also decided to say that he saw these snakes in one kiosk, and if he did not believe him, then he could go and buy this snake right now and try it. But the seller thought that he had a better option, as it turned out. He had one of these snakes lying around in a distant drawer. He opened the box, which indeed contained one of these bamboo snakes, and the first thing he had to do was cut it open. And as soon as he managed to get the gall sac out of the snake's body, the guy immediately brought it to his mouth to swallow. Imagine his surprise when he felt that the effect came literally within a few seconds. He immediately knelt down in front of Zhang and began to thank him for this, because he could finally feel like a man again, and as a token of gratitude, he would like to give him all this icy sungrass. Zhang laughed at him and said that as he said, the seller would give him the herb for free. The salesman felt a little ashamed that he had not immediately recognized Zhang as a talented person, when suddenly their conversation was interrupted by the shouts of other people who were very loudly discussing the fact that Master Mo Yang was finally here. They believed that they had the opportunity to receive his invaluable advice, and if they were lucky, they would definitely become his students. Zhang didn't quite understand what was going on, so the shopkeeper explained to him that it seemed that Master Mo Yang had come to the village again. According to the guy, he is simply an excellent appraiser, and as far as Zhang understood, this is a rather specific profession, like a gourmet, and they are valued approximately the same. But whether to follow the appraiser's advice or not is like gambling. You never know until the end whether you will be lucky or not. Betting on treasures is like betting on precious stones in his world. Someone will get a fake, and someone will get a valuable artifact. But with the library of the heavenly path, he doesn't need luck at all. He just needs to touch the object, and he will understand everything immediately. And considering all this, he realized that at the moment, this is the best way to get rich. So Zhang decided not to stand still for long and take action. He asked the guy to pick up the grass later, after which he said goodbye to him. When he arrived at the scene, the first thing he saw was how people were literally going crazy over this Master Mo Yang. Each of them wanted to hear his advice. This master replied to all these people that he would leave here tonight, but he still wanted to thank them for the hospitality they had shown him, and so he was willing to give advice to the 5 people. He also assured them that they also did not need to quarrel, because if they were destined to receive help, then so it would be. Zhang, meanwhile, continued to look at the exhibits displayed in this market, and at some point he reached a table where there was a vase that, although it looked impressive, still assured him that it was just junk. Now he was 100% sure that, as he thought, with one touch he would be able to find out detailed information about everything, and he also immediately realized that the prices here were terribly inflated. People were clearly upset when they heard that Master Mo was leaving that evening, and so they began to suggest that he stay for at least one more day. He immediately assured them that it was simply impossible, as he had things he couldn't cancel, so it was out of the question, but he still decided that he would add 5 more, because as they knew, searching for treasure among trash was a difficult task that required concentration, and therefore 10 was his limit. People started shouting that they were ready to pay him for help, if only he would give them advice, but he immediately answered them that they were telling him complete nonsense, because he had been doing his craft for a very long time, and if he wanted to make money on it, he would have done it without them. He could have bought the treasures and sold them for a higher price. According to him, he helps them for their gratitude and bright emotions, because money for him is water, which has no value. And he immediately warned that if anyone spoke about money again, he would not help them. After these words, they began to respect him even more, and also asked him for forgiveness for their stupidity. He also wanted to tell them that the appraiser could actually only increase the chances that they would not get a fake, but they still could not get a complete guarantee of success. But as long as they were with him, he would do everything to help them with this. They immediately raised their hands for his attention, and Master Mo decided to pick out the old man in the front row first. He explained to them that he would now use his special technique to understand which of them deserved their attention and which did not. After analyzing, he pointed out to the old man the vase that Zhang had recently looked at. Master Mo thought that the old man could safely buy this vase because it was actually very valuable. After all, it was created at the end of the Kobun period. The old man got his money without any problem and was going to buy this vase because Master Mo himself advised him to buy it. Zhang watched this process, when suddenly he realized that he had just been looking at this vase, and if he was not mistaken, then this was a normal phase from Qing Yun's workshop. As a token of gratitude, the old man immediately brought Master Mo a few coins, which he happily took, and Zhang began to understand that he had definitely not made a mistake with this vase. Suddenly his body moved back to the library, which Zhang didn't understand because Master Mo didn't seem to have landed any combat moves on him. But the book about that person was still flying towards him. In this book, it was written that Master Mo was originally an appraiser's appraiser, worked as an informant in the Liuju kingdom, and eventually made his way into the appraisers of artifacts with his generalizing voice that clouded people's minds with words, convincing them of the master's greatness. Zhang took another look and noticed that this man really looked refined and highly moral, so much so that he even managed to deceive him. But now he realized that if there are scammers, then there are also their victims, and apparently, most of this crowd are victims. Zhang decided that everything was so good that he didn't need any help, and he got ready to leave. Suddenly, he was stopped by the same Master Mo, who had chosen the guy as the next lucky one to whom he would give advice. This obviously surprised Zhang. After all, there were a sea of crazy fans of this Master Mo around, so why did he decide to choose Zhang? Zhang decided to immediately answer him that he certainly appreciated his kindness, but he did not need his help, although the old man did not think so, because he saw that the boy did not know what to choose, and he really did not want the boy to become a beggar at such a young age, so he asked the boy to think again. Zhang knew very well that if he listened to this master, he would definitely be left without money, so he assured Master Mo that he definitely did not need his help. But the old man still continued to insist, because he believed that it was not easy for a young man to quickly accumulate capital, and he was now giving him such an opportunity, and his kind heart could not allow him to spend a lot of money on scrap metal or other junk. His fans began to admire him even more after these words. At one point, Master Mo said that he was almost certain that the guy was probably thinking that he finally had a great chance to get the treasure, and he also felt that he wouldn't be able to protect it because they would most likely want to take it by force. Zhang, listening to all this, became more and more convinced with each passing second that this old man was too proud, and how could he even come up with such nonsense? Master Mo continued to tell his fans that he had chosen this young man, and no matter what treasure he received, he would always hope that none of them would covet it, otherwise he would consider it an insult, and then he would be merciless. After which the old man turned to Zhang again and asked the boy to rejoice, because if he was giving him the last place, it meant that it was his destiny, and he in turn believed in karma most of all. and therefore he was giving these treasures completely free of charge and only with good intentions. The old man even prepared a valuable item from one of the sellers, whom he asked to calculate the exact cost of this item. According to the seller's invoices, all they wanted from Zhang was 30,000 coins, and all the people standing behind the guy literally pressured him and told him how lucky he was, because as soon as he bought this thing, he would almost immediately become richer, and then acquire a whole fortune. At some point, Zhang couldn't take it anymore, and so he yelled at the old man that he wouldn't buy anything. And if he wanted to deceive people, then the old man was unlucky today because he chose the wrong person, because Zhang didn't trust him at all. Master Mo couldn't believe that this guy would tell him such a thing, and the people standing behind him also stared for a long time and didn't understand what was going on here. The old man's face immediately changed, and he said that, apparently, they simply did not understand each other. Zhang couldn't hold back any longer, and said outright that the old man was just pretending not to understand what Zhang was telling him, because it was completely obvious to the boy that he was just deceiving ordinary people. But what irritated him most was that the old man acted as if he was better than him. The old man got really angry, called Zhang an impudent man, and told him to shut up. He then added that he had received his qualification 30 years ago and had been helping people all this time. According to him, he had always solved other people's problems honestly, and no one had ever called him a liar before. The common people also began to stand up for the old man and tell Zhang that Master Mo Yang had been helping people honestly, and so they couldn't understand how Zhang could even accuse him of lying. Then the old man said that the guy was incredibly lucky that he turned out to be a kind person, and if the guy now asks for forgiveness, then so be it. He will forget about his offensive words. But Zhang thought they needed to do something a little different, because in fact his words were very easy to verify. You just need to reveal what this scammer just sold to the person, and people will immediately understand everything. The old man pretended to be very surprised, because according to him, the purification of artifacts, which he advised people to do, would take at least half a day. But as he said, he had urgent matters to attend to, and he simply could not wait that long. But from Zhang's face, he could tell that the guy was literally holding back from saying that he was using his busyness as an excuse to leave early because he would be ashamed of his actions. At that moment, Zhang thought that he was quite a professional liar because he had already thought of an escape route in advance and said so. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by one person from the crowd who suggested that since this guy claimed that the master was a fraud, then he himself apparently had knowledge of this craft, and if this was really the case, then he had better demonstrate it. The old man smiled and agreed with the gentleman, because if the guy was so confident in his words, then he probably did a lot of evaluation research himself, since he dared to insult him. Master Mo Yan decided that he would give this guy a chance, but for this, Zhang needed to choose one artifact, and if it was of value, then it would be possible to continue the dialogue with him. Zhang agreed to this condition without hesitation, as he understood that with the library of the heavenly path, he would be able to easily name a truly valuable thing. But before that, he decided to ask the seller if he would be able to pay for the artifact after polishing, when its true price would become clear. The seller immediately refused him because, according to him, it was necessary to pay in advance. This rule was introduced to prevent liars who refused to pay if the cost of the goods did not cover its original cost. But suddenly this salesman was interrupted by Master Mo, who asked him that this guy pay in a way that was more convenient for him, and if this young man won, then he would pay for him, and if not, then he would just apologize, as he said. Zhang was more than satisfied with these conditions, so he waved to the teacher and said that he would definitely not refuse help, and thanked the old man in advance. Master Mo thought that he had never seen such rude people. After this, Zhang began to look at the items, and the first thing he did was approach the item he had already looked at, and if it weren't for the lack of money, he would have bought it. But since the old man was paying, he saw no point in refusing. Without any doubt, he took the stone in his hands, threw it into the hands of the seller, and said that he had chosen exactly this thing. After which he immediately asked to be cleared here, in front of all the people, so that no one could accuse him of lying. The salesman stood there in a stupor for a while, not knowing what to do next, until old man Mo asked him to clean the goods, as he was sure that Zhang knew nothing about them, and had obviously chosen the goods at random. The man who was cleaning that stone thought at that moment that he really wanted to look at that guy's face when they were cleaning that stone and found nothing there. And in his head he had thoughts that he gave him small stones because they were ordinary roadside stones. But apparently he was very wrong. Because when he cleared away what he thought was an ordinary roadside stone, he discovered a ling-long stone. It was the main material for making ghost armor, and each of them was worth a fortune, since it was extremely rare. They began to discuss among themselves that this stone was so large and apparently without impurities, which meant that it could be worth about 100,000 coins, which could not help but please Zhang. The old man, without thinking twice, began to make excuses and say that the guy was just lucky, and that in any case it didn't mean anything.